Welcome back, everybody. Good morning. Welcome back to the State Library Job Fair, Day 2. I hope you all found your perfect candidates yesterday, and we'll just recycle the name badges and swap out the states next year. It'll be great. Welcome back. We are heading into the last day of the conference. I see the luggage has already found its way over to the back wall. We're going to have a dedicated break at 10 o'clock that's longer. It's a 10 to 10:30 break if you need to check out of your rooms. And we know those elevators are not moving fast, so we hope you make it through, but luggage can go in the back. We have an exciting morning with our director this morning. And I'm just going to spend the first 15 minutes kind of kicking us off. We'll play a fun game if you're up for it. So be thinking about this. I'm going to ask you to finish the phrase, I came to Seattle and blank. I came to Seattle and I blank. So you can share things from the Work World conference. You can share things from your tourism venues out in the world. You can share things you learned from fellow participants. I came to Seattle and I blank. And if you do this, we've got some leftover Emerald City candies for you. I think we'll kick it off though with our parking lot questions from yesterday. These were the things that we didn't have time to answer during the scheduled program. So we're going to revisit them a bit today. So kind of going in order from the topics that we covered yesterday, we had a question, this is in pertinence to the state program report, the SPR. Will additional materials be public facing in the future? Question mark. It's a question mark for us too. We have heard that that might be helpful. We've heard that we might need to put some controls around that, like some things being public and some things not. That you would have control over. So we'll certainly be looking into it, but we don't know yet. We're going to find out. What makes a project exemplary in the SPR? A number of things. These are determined by you. They help us though, when you are a state that maybe has 100 projects to choose from and we get a call from someone in your state that might work on the Hill and they want to know like what the exemplary projects were last year, what were the highlights. It's really hard for us to parse through 100 projects in like 4 hours. So if you have marked something exemplary, it's super helpful to us. Maybe it was done super cost efficiently and became a model for the rest of the state. Maybe it represented new partnerships. I mean, you will know and your recipients will know when something really was outstanding. We hope, and we hope that you'll utilize that exemplary projects field to let us know what those are. We had a comment about implementing the multi-factor authentication. So I know Sridhar will be all ears. One issue with login.gov is that even if you check off that you want it to remember your device, it almost every time, even within a day or two, in some way asks for you to recertify again. So for a system like the SPR, please make sure it remembers us for longer. And then I think this is a clarification statement. It's about reporting for the 23 to 27 5-year plan. In the SPR, we will report on old projects coming up. That's correct. The next reporting cycle, if you're not already in an extension for ARPA, which means you're in fiscal 21, the next cycle that's coming up and ending is fiscal year 2022. That was in the old cycle. So in the 5-year evaluation, we will need the new project info for 22 or 23. I think that's their state range for the first year of the evaluation. We rearranged a lot of our projects and added some in the new plan. So I think the system and our coaching you through the 5-year evaluation for the next cycle will accommodate this. We're going to have the next 5-year evaluation accommodating fiscal year 23, 24, and 25, because as you know, we can only ever get through the first 3 years of a 5-year cycle when we do the 5-year evaluation. So it's not that the 2022 grants are a throwaway. We still really care about them, but they're not going to be included in the formal evaluation. And they will come under your old goals. And we keep saying over and over again, don't change your goals yet. And this is why. Okay, we have just the inspirational content, intentional approach to belonging, inclusion, and equity. Maybe that is coaching us towards a place in the future. And if so, we appreciate you. And then we've got a fun question. I guess this is a show of hands, or maybe a microphone question. In honor of Taylor Swift's upcoming tour, which Swiftie era are you? I don't know the Swiftie eras, so I'm a bad asker of this question. Anyone? Folklore. I hear a folklore. And some seconds, and was it red? I'm so out of this. Great question. Great question. What was that? Reputation. A mean Taylor Swift. Okay. Great question. Let's go on to our trivia question. I came to Seattle and I blank. Who would like to be our brave volunteer at a microphone to go first to tell us how they end that sentence? I gave you 3 minutes to think about it.
Streets or the hills of San Francisco.
Woo! Thank you.
I came to Seattle and thought I was going to have a heart attack walking the hills of Seattle.
But you're still here.
I came to Seattle and took an Uber so I didn't have to do the hills.
I came to Seattle and I saw the shrunken heads.
Ooh,
Do you want to know where they are?
tell us more.
If you walk straight down the hill, and you could take an Uber back, get to the water, and there's a place called Ye Old Curiosity Shop, and it's right on the water. It's a Seattle go-to place, and they have tiny shrunken heads and all sorts of weird, gory things.
I'm so excited. I actually got to come to Seattle. I did not get stuck in Atlanta this year.
And given that Wendy was our MC yesterday, we're so glad you made it. Great MC job.
I came to Seattle and I learned that people like to take stuff from Ohio and that Evan doesn't know inches from feet. May I have two? Okay. I came to Seattle, took an Uber to a restaurant that turned out to be closed and walked up the hill a second time. And I came to Seattle and I'm taking Bigfoot home.
I came to Seattle and I followed Susan to the restaurant that was closed.
We all follow Susan sometimes. All right. Thank you for indulging that. It's great to hear how you spent your time in Seattle. All right. We are turning to a session I'm really excited about. And I want to say that we've had a setting of expectations with our current director, Crosby Kemper, that I'm not sure we'll be able to maintain in the future. Crosby has graced us with his presence at this conference for many years running, and I'm here to tell you that's not the norm. So, sorry, Crosby, we roped you in unknowingly to this conference. We're so grateful that you've been coming and spending your time with us, though. It really means a lot. Crosby is headed into his last year with IMLS. So we've prepped everybody to ask their best and brightest questions of you. We have 45 minutes to hear from Crosby. And he, you know, as many of you know, has been just a wonderful director for this time. He's gotten us through the pandemic. He is a driving force behind why the stimulus funds happened and rolled out so well. He continues, yeah, let's give him a. He continues to bring really positive energy and focus from other arenas to our agency. He continues to bring new resources in the form of personnel and funding into our agency in ways that we haven't seen for years. And on top of all this, he finds time to read deeply and think critically and make us all laugh all the time. So I hope that you'll enjoy this next, we have maybe a half an hour to hear from Crosby and then maybe 15 minutes or so for questions. Please help me welcome him, our director.
Thank you, Terry, so much. I appreciate, I always love Terry's introductions. She describes a person I don't recognize, but she said, I'm not the norm, and what she really meant is I'm not normal. And that's true. So, you know, you're going to hear from me today, and I apologize in advance. I came to Seattle expecting that it would rain, and I'm so disappointed. I do have a theme, Jamie from Arizona asked me a great question just a few minutes over here about application processes and money for the digital divide and that sort of thing. So I think actually the question and answer session may be the most important thing. So I'll try and get through what I have to say fairly quickly. I actually have about 10 pages of things I wanted to say, so I'll try and cut it down a little bit so we can get to the questions. But I do have a theme, and I was reading I read a little bit of a new book by a guy named Richard Haas, who's one of our leading diplomats and been president of the Council on Foreign Relations for a long time. It's called The Bill of Obligations. And in it, he has a great phrase that I give to you. I hope I'll also finish with this, the theme of my remarks, which is, he said, in this country, we have a commitment to rights. And we all know how important that is, even in sometimes the absence of our fully adhering to those rights, but we're all struggling to retain the commitment to rights that is in our founding and is in our DNA, I think. He said, we have a commitment to rights, but we also need a culture of obligation. That obligation is the other side of rights, of the coin of our realm. And I believe that's absolutely true. And I'll get back to that in a minute. But the first thing I want to say to you about the Grants to States program, state librarians, state library authorities, is that you are the partners with this agency in the largest cultural program of the federal government. It is, I think, one of the most, if not the most important programs for a lot of reasons. When I last talked to you, last talked to a state library group at the COSLA meeting in Montana, the retreat in Montana, I was talking about Jay Ashcroft and some rulemaking that Jay had done for spending of state library money in Missouri. I sent him a letter about this. He actually asked my opinion about this, which was a mistake on his part, because I told him that it wouldn't work, that he was handing to any citizen with any kind of reason for restricting a book, the ability for anybody to restrict a book for everybody. And that's the exact opposite of what libraries should be doing. And it makes it impossible for a library to maintain a collection. You could have a Wahhabi Muslim come in and say, I don't want any books with an undressed woman, i.e. a woman not completely covered, and that would eliminate a very large percentage of our books. You could have the question of a book like Huckleberry Finn, which if you're an African-American parent, you might have a reason to not want your child to read Huckleberry Finn, particularly at a certain age, because the N-word is all through it. Now it is in its at core, it's the first great anti-racist novel. It's a satire of racism, but not every child is going to understand that at a certain age. So do we take Huckleberry Finn off the library shelves? Do we take, you could go through a list of any kind of objection to books, and just about any book could be taken off the table. And then there's the Parents' Rights Bill that some folks, actually the person who's been supportive of the IMLS was the original author of the Parents' Rights Bill in Congress, which just passed the House and will die in the Senate. And if you actually read it carefully, it's all about making sure that parents have an engagement with particularly school districts, but also libraries. And that's something that in the Library Bill of Rights, in the culture of librarianship, is actually something that I believe we endorse. The single most important thing about it, however, is that it is a federal law. And the United States, with the exception of filtering, the federal government has never stepped in to talk about how libraries should operate. Libraries, like school districts, are local institutions. I'm a federalist. I'm a Madisonian. I'm a believer that the founders created a unique system of government with a balance of powers and levels of sovereignty, including not only the federal government, state governments and local governments, and that school districts and libraries are a part of that. So when I talk to Julia Letlow, who is the Congresswoman, and I will, who wrote the bill, I will praise her for the sentiments in the bill. And I think the ALA should have done the same thing. I think they made a mistake in the heavy criticism they gave to the bill, and just simply say that this isn't federal responsibility. It is a local responsibility. I think the local responsibility of librarians is probably the single most important thing about libraries today. We live in a time when community is fractured, when we see social media encouraging the extremes of our anger, our categorization of each other as others. Mark Zuckerberg created Facebook thinking he was going to create a global community, and instead he's created a global nightmare in which we're all as angry as we can be on social media. And that includes, unfortunately, a lot of librarians. We should pay attention to the fact that community is only built face-to-face, and it's built in understanding each other. That obligation that we have as librarians to understand our communities and understanding everybody in our community as an individual. Right? And we live in a time that's not only polarized, but in which so many people are living alone. We have 28% of our households are single-person households. This is the highest number of that kind in the history of this country, I think in the history of the world. And every frontline librarian understands the problem with that. The mental health problems that we have in this country, which are, of course, encouraged by drug and alcohol problems. I mean, it's not just the Sacklers. It's good to have a villain in all of this, but in fact, we're all engaged in this. People living alone, people with drug and alcohol problems, with mental health problems, encounters with the justice system, etc. We librarians know homelessness, crime, you name it, eviction, any problem that we have in our community is tied directly back to these problems, the problems of people living alone, and it's also tied directly back to literacy. We know that most homeless people, significant portion of homeless people, significant portion, majority, are either homeless people of criminals of the people living alone are people who have either limited or no literacy, or they're literate only enough to post on social media in the simple ways that we all post on social media. So what's the solution to this? One of the solutions, it seems to me, is that we concentrate again in librarianship on where we came from, which is reading and literacy. So to tell you a little bit about what we're doing, a year ago in March, we had a convening on reading and literacy with Robert Putnam from Harvard, and Marianne Wolf from UCLA, and some leaders in the library world, talking about this, talking about what we know about literacy in the library, what we know about reading. We know a lot. We need to know more. So we're going to be doing research at the IMLS. Matt Birnbaum, who is the head of our Office of Research and Evaluation, is here somewhere. There he is. And he'll be doing research. He'll working with the library community and with the research community on early childhood and libraries. I think ultimately we'll look at summer reading and libraries and what we should be doing about that. And we'll help start practice groups, I hope at the state library level, at the Urban Library Council level, at rural and small libraries, and the research libraries, and focus more on literacy, and particularly literacy that crosses all the divides we have in this country. Before we go to the question and answers session, I do want to talk a little bit about the positive things that are happening in our world. And I'll leave the digital divide to the question and answer session, but the United States Congress, in its infinite wisdom, namely Senator Reid from Rhode Island, who's been our biggest supporter in the Senate, asked us to form an information literacy task force. We've already had 2 convenings of essentially the research community and the federal government community, agencies and departments, to talk about what's going on in the federal government and what the research shows about information literacy. We're going to concentrate on public health and financial literacy, the 2 areas where we think, A, we know a lot, and B, libraries play a significant role, and C, it's relatively speaking in this country at this time, nothing is completely controversy free, but relatively bipartisan. We learned a lot during the pandemic about what works in terms of local information about things like vaccines and masking. We learned that at the local level, public health authorities at the local level, working with libraries, working with museums, science centers, et cetera, working with local community groups and civic groups, social justice groups, were able to reverse some of what happened at the beginning of the pandemic, which was, of course, people of color, poor people, people on the other side of all of our divides, worse affected by the pandemic. And we reversed some of that during the course of the pandemic. In the second year of the pandemic, in terms of infections and death, people of color, specifically Hispanics and African Americans, actually had a better experience than white people in the second year, according to CDC statistics. Now, there are controversies about why that is, but it seems to me and to others, David Leonhardt writing in the New York Times, that some of that has to do with local information being delivered by trusted sources, especially libraries at the local level. And I won't say that everything was great during the pandemic among libraries. Some libraries participated in that, some did not. And Slover Lynette did a study in which it showed that only 27% of the population felt libraries had successfully participated in the pandemic. So I hope that, again, when we look at our communities from the point of view of obligation, we understand that our obligation extends to things like the pandemic, to the public health, of the community. So we're going to be doing 2 more convenings, and libraries will be involved, and state librarians, state library authorities will be involved. And I would encourage any of you who are interested in the topic to join with us. We'll be doing one at the Liberty Science Center in Jersey City in June, and a little bit later in June. Actually, I hope I've got this right, and I may have it backwards. Matt, do I have it backwards? We're doing one in Providence, Rhode Island. The 1st and 2nd of June in Providence at the Providence Library, which has, not being a surprise, the Senator Jack Reed Information Commons, and Senator Reed encouraged us to do one in Providence, and the Providence Library is a great library, so we're happy to be there. And then the middle of June, we'll be doing Liberty Science Center. We hope that we can be a positive source of information literacy in the country. We'll be dealing with misinformation and disinformation, but in a very different way than some other parts of the federal government have dealt with it. We'll be looking for creating information literacy at the local level because of the civic trust of local institutions, particularly libraries and museums. The other positive thing that has been given to us this time by the president that I want you to know about, and that I hope will participate. We will all participate in this. Is the president reestablished the President's Committee on the Arts and Humanities. Those folks who resigned after a previous president misspoke about what happened in Charlottesville. President Biden has reestablished the President's Committee on the Arts and Humanities, and it reports to the IMLS. It's housed inside the IMLS. Sion Wolden-Michael was picked by the president. She was a Smithsonian curator. She was picked by the president to be the executive director, and she offices with us. The president talked about cultural vitality in his executive order, and I hope that the PCAH will demonstrate that, and we'll have some fun. It is meant to support, for the executive order, the IMLS and the other 2 cultural agencies, are slightly smaller sisters, the NEH and the NEA, slightly smaller because of the grants to states program, which should be said. And so we're looking forward to that. We're looking forward to having some positive things, some celebratory things going on through the President's Committee. You'll see that the president has picked, I think actually the First Lady had a lot to do with it, has picked the 25 committee members. Let's say hooray for Hollywood. I can't reveal their names to you, but we have the names, and it will be an exciting group. Some people known for their big smiles. And so we're excited about that. And the other thing we're excited about that I think is also a very positive thing, and we want to engage at the state level, and we want to engage at the local level. In fact, we want to be the agency that engages at most with local communities and through state libraries and state library authorities, if we can do that. And that is America 250, celebration or commemoration, investigation, and vigilation of the Declaration of Independence and our 250 years of history since then. We're working with the American Association of State and Local History, with USCIS, the Customs and Immigration Service, and the Constitution Center on this, and the Constitution Center in Philadelphia. But the person who's most influenced our thinking, my thinking about this, is Danielle Allen, professor at Harvard, whom you might know from her work on civics. We funded some of her work on civics in high schools and libraries in Massachusetts. But she's an African-American political philosophy professor. Her first book was on Plato at Harvard. But she's written a book that I think is the book that most ought to direct our work on America 250, and it's called Our Declaration. And it's about how the word equality gives the most important meaning to the Declaration, that we can't have freedom without equality. And her book is, I think, the most important contemporary look at the Declaration. And she also wrote in The Atlantic about a year and a half ago a great essay about why I love why she loves the Constitution. And again, it comes from the point of view of working through the importance of all men are created equal from the Declaration through the Constitution in the present day America, and how hard we all have to work on being better representatives of at least the ideals in those documents. So we will be trying to tell local stories with America 250, stories that tie local history, local heroes, local events to the meaning of the Declaration, the meaning of the Constitution. As I say, we're working with USCIS, the ASLH, and the Constitution Center on this. One of the things, and I would love to have you all think about this and help us with this, that we want to do is focus on the naturalization ceremony. Naturalization ceremony, where immigrants take the oath of citizenship, is increasingly done in libraries and some museums. When I was director in Kansas City, we sort of specialized in this. We had one event with 120 new citizens from 70 different countries. One event, one oath-taking ceremony. And of course, it's very moving. Their families are there. They've worked hard to do this, spent money and resources, and they've taken a test about American history and government that most high school graduates, I think most college graduates in America couldn't pass. But the most important thing about the oath of citizenship is that it's not just an acceptance of the rights of citizenship. It is also an acceptance of the obligations of citizenship. And in my view, the most important sentence in 20th century philosophy was written, I happened to be reading a book about her last night by Robert Zaretsky, a statement by Simone Weil. Simone Weil was a philosopher, a defender of workers' rights in France in the 1920s and 30s, a Jew who became interested in Catholicism, never converted, but spent a lot of time in cathedrals. And Charles de Gaulle asked her to write the program of the French resistance for what they would do if they came back to power at the end of the war, if they took it back from the Germans. And the first sentence of what is in English called her program, which is called The Need for Roots. The first sentence is obligations precede rights. And I believe that that is a call to action and a motto befitting librarians in this country. Our obligations, we've always felt an obligation to our community, an obligation to each other. And I think at our best, we've always felt an obligation to some higher power, whether that's reason or nature or God, or whatever you think is the higher power in your life. My view, it's all three, but our sense of obligation has always been pretty high, but our sense of obligation to each other in the community is still the most important thing that we do. So I thank you all so much for being a part of our very beautiful, if very trying and very tough world. Your sense of obligation and our sense of obligation at the IMLS to you is the most important part of what we do. Thanks. I would be happy to take questions. Jamie, you want to ask your question again?
This is coming from, I noticed that we got fewer Wi-Fi hotspot lending sub-grant requests because of the ECF coming in. So libraries are like, we're getting money from other places. So my question is, could you talk a little bit about the relationship between IMLS and the FCC and NPIA and what's going on with the money?
This is such a great softball question. Thank you. So this is a huge thing to me. I was the director of the library in Kansas City, and I still have a problem, just getting online, much less using the internet. And Google Fiber shows up in Kansas City, so I became an instant expert on the internet, right? So we worked with Google Fiber, Well, I went on all kinds of panels and committees, and was in the White House with the Connect Ed and Connect Home and all that. We sent one of our partners to run Connect Home in the government, et cetera. And then I became chair of Shelby Schools, Healthcare, Libraries, and Broadband, the leading advocacy organization, et cetera. So that's probably one of the reasons I got the IMLS job, and because I work closely with the ALA on that, et cetera. And but here's the story of the federal government and the internet. If the various people who are involved in all of this had been asked, John Windhausen at Shelby, for instance, Angela Seifer at the NDIA, which I helped, the first contribution to the NDIA was from me in the library. If we asked any of us how much money it would take to connect everybody in the United States, we would have said a number like $100 billion. And out of the last Trump budget, the first Biden budget, ARPA, and the infrastructure budget, we are spending $100 billion on the internet. We are not spending it through the IMLS. We are spending it through the FCC, the NTIA, and the largest amount of money through the governors, through however each individual state, that's the infrastructure money, is going to spend that money. And some of you have been involved in digital equity plans. I hope all of you are involved at some point, because that's really the point of capture for this money. But as I was saying to Jamie earlier, we know who will be involved for sure, and who has been involved up to this point. We know that AT&T has a lobbyist in every state. We know that rural telephone companies have got lobbyists in most states. I could go down a list of all the people who've got lobbyists, and not every state, certainly not every state library, not every state library association has got a lobbyist. And frequently, this was true in Missouri, when I was a director in Missouri, the lobbyist for the Missouri Library Association was also working for one of the rural telephone companies. And you can guess what his priority was. My point about this is that we were given all this money, but it's a highly politicized process, and you have to be involved politically to get access to the money, or it's the money at the FCC and the NTIA. They got, we'll spend maybe $10 million of our budget will be spent related to the digital divide over the next year, maybe a little more, maybe a little less. The NTIA got $3 billion, ultimately $10 billion. I think the FCC's got gobs of money. And as I said to Jamie, and I will deny I said this if you take it out of this room, any federal agency that's run by lawyers, the FCC and the NTIA, will have an application process that nobody can navigate without a consultant. And I'm serious about this. When I write my letter to the president after I leave the IMLS, item 1, if we're about equity, and we should be about equity, equity is my middle name as a federal bureaucrat. If we're about equity, we have to make the application process easier. I tell you, I spoke to a Department of Education seminar on this with about 100 people in the room, and I said that, and I got a standing ovation. Everybody in the federal government knows this when you talk to them about it, but we can't change it. We can't change it in part because, well, lawyers are running things. Sorry, that my anti-elitist moment, my own anti-elitist moment. But we have made some progress on that. I do want to say this, is that I've spent time since my Shelby days and at the IMLS talking to Chair Pai and now Chair Rosenworcel at the FCC, talking to the folks at the NTIA, and they know they have a problem. And you probably didn't see, but you could have seen, were you paying really close attention to our press releases and their press releases that we issued simultaneous press releases a couple of weeks ago, the FCC, the NTIA, and the IMLS, talking about the application process and how we're going to make it easier. When the E-rate process really gets so that a small library, small school district can apply without a consultant, I'll believe it. I don't at the moment believe it, even though we issued the press release saying this is great news. We are working on that. We get it. We absolutely get it. And on their good days, even the director at the NTIA and the chair of the FCC get it. I think nobody else in the federal government, I don't think at the top, and I talked to Secretary Cardona about this at the Department of Education. He's a great guy. He wants to do the right thing, but he's got other problems. And that's the problem with the larger agencies and departments of the federal government. They have so many things they do. This one seems easy. We write a check, we put it into a bucket that's called the digital divide, and we walk off to the next problem. And unfortunately, after that, it's the people in charge of the application process who are lawyers, and they make it too difficult. So we're making progress on this, but it's not enough progress. And I'm serious about writing a letter to the president about this when I leave. Yeah, I was watching NPR. I was watching C-SPAN. Sorry, but not last night, but the night before last, in my room, not wanting to come downstairs because I knew it would take an hour and a half on the elevator. I was watching C-SPAN, and they had the guy who I had never heard of. I had never heard of this guy who was in charge of broadband for the federal government. I'm sorry. This is one of those things, so Alice in Wonderland once you get inside of this. But anyway, I hope that answers your question about it. We still have roughly the same amount of money in the sense that our GST, our grants to states budget's actually gotten a little bit bigger each year. We probably tracked until this year at least above inflation. This year we're probably, even though we had an increase, it probably didn't beat inflation, but that's true of everything in the federal government. So we still have money available for the digital divide from our point of view. We're not lowering the amount of money that's going into LSTA grants that can make it into that side. But the really big money is elsewhere, and it's still going to be difficult. But if you've got a digital equity plan in your state, which you must have actually to spend the money, we need to be involved in that. That's the biggest gift I can give to you, is be involved at the state level. More questions? As you can tell, I have a few opinions. Happy to give it to you.
I'll ask the question while the rest of you think of your questions. Crosby, yesterday we looked at some of the 5-year plan intentions across the states. Emily had rolled those up for us. And one of the big focus areas was reading, which we know is something that you are a champion of and that you have visions around. And I wonder if you have words for this room as everybody embarks on their new 5-year plans and thinks about reading and the importance.
Sure. So first of all, from an equity point of view, as I mentioned before, virtually every problem we've got in this country, including the divides we have in this country, relate to reading. Reading is the foundational skill. You can't really use the internet, can't do the digital things that you want to do, particularly in terms of workforce development, healthcare, education. If you go up the ladder of education, you have to be literate, right? And we know, again, I mean, I know this just from my experience in the Kansas City Public Library. We had a big homeless population. The central library, during the day when the shelters were closed, the places that homeless population in Kansas City went, there were 3 places. Also, by the way, the same thing is true of the group coming out of the long-term prison population in the state of Missouri. The long-term prison population, when they come out, go to 2 facilities in the state, one that's very close to the St. Louis Public Library and one that's very close to the Kansas City Public Library on their way out of prison. And the same thing is true of the homeless group and of this group coming out of long-term prison. And that is they go either to a day job operation, day labor operation. They go to the mental health clinic, a state mental health clinic, or they go to the library. The one place where they're getting serious positive help is the library. And the day labor stuff is, well, it's mostly a joke. There's some good programs around, but they're small. And with both of these populations, over 50% of these populations, the homeless population and the long-term criminal population, are illiterate. And virtually all of them are only partially literate. And so literacy is a huge factor in every problem we have in this country, and it's foundational. So it's the most important thing we can do. And we know from all the research, there's a huge amount of research about reading. There's a huge amount of research about how you learn to read. And what that research tells you is two things. One, the informal support, i.e. libraries, is hugely important. Two, that interactive reading. You all have probably heard of the 30 million word gap. Hart and Risley did this research at KU, just down the road from me, at University of Kansas in the 90s. And there's been high quality research on what exactly that means, the 30 million word gap. But it's the quality of the words is important, not just the volume of the words. And the quality comes from interactivity. It comes from adults reading with children, and one thing especially to know, children reading to adults, reading back to adults. And we know that pleasure reading has a lot to do this, that when the first time a child picks a book on her own is a key moment in life. And that happens in libraries. That happens in libraries. So reading is deeply important. And we in the library world have, of course, gotten away from that. When I became a member of the Urban Library Council in 2005, the ULC had put out a strategic plan, 15 or 20 page strategic plan. I read it, and my very first post on the Urban Library Council listserv was, is anybody else bothered by the fact that the word reading does not occur in the strategic plan of the Urban Library Council? It was interesting. I got a lot of, for the first and only time, a lot of positive comment on the post in the Urban Library Council. And since then, it's been important to me. Our tagline in Kansas City was Kansas City a community, making Kansas City a community of readers. And we tried to do that in every way we could. I think it's the most important equity thing that we do, is reading. And I know we've been asked by the community in so many ways to do so many different things. We're the Swiss Army knife now. Libraries are the Swiss Army knife of the community. Whenever there's a problem, we get involved in it. And that's going to continue to be true. There's no way around that. But we have to educate the community's leadership, civic leadership, to understand that what youth librarians do, what children's librarians do, the book is still very important. And all three things, having books in the library, having books in our branches in particular, and having librarians who can interact with kids in reading groups of all kinds, is probably still the most important thing we do. And we can't defund libraries or take library resources to other places without continuing to fund what we do in reading, and maybe expanding what we do in reading. So thanks, Terry, for that softball.
So I understand your tenure at IMLS will be coming to an end, and I just have to ask, what are your plans post your position?
Number one, it's also possible the president could extend my term by a year. Thank you. He won't, because we're supposed to shift to a museum person in the next iteration, and I guarantee you the AAM and the AAMD and those folks are probably already talking to the president about getting rid of that library person. But what I might do, we've been working very closely on various things that we do with some foundations in the country, with the Knight Foundation, for instance, and I'm very close to John Palfrey, who runs the MacArthur Foundation. We've received funding from the Mellon Foundation over the years, et cetera. I'm hoping that I can do something in our world, in the library world in particular, that has to do with the question of reading and equity. And we're going to be doing a convening towards the end of the year with the New York Public Library on this subject. how we reach across the various divides and help build a more literate, more equally literate, equitably literate population. And I hope I can convince some foundations to help us in doing that and play a role, continue to play a role in this going forward. So that's my plan, such as it is, or the president could, make me Secretary of State.
I'm Michael Goldrick from Louisiana. And in your opening comments, you talked about a culture of obligation. I'd be interested to hear what does that mean to you, and what is the public library's role in creating a culture of obligation?
Right. So civic trust is probably the most important thing that libraries have. We're probably, you hear that you look at Pew studies of this or Gallup studies or whatever. And the military is, basically the only positively viewed institution in every study. Pew's studies show that libraries are at the same level as the military and once upon a time police and fire departments. And how do we get that civic trust? Well, I believe it's because the view of the population. I mean, I know this is true. We went out for an increase in our levy in Kansas City and got 84% of the vote. And we polled people, we talked to people, et cetera, in all parts of our community. And we were trusted in every part of the community. And we were trusted to be nonpartisan, to be about serving everybody in the community, and to be about the community. And I think that's the view of libraries in most places. I think we run some danger in the current polarized time if we don't recognize that we're serving everybody in the community, and that includes people we might not agree with politically. And so one of the important things about that is that we find ways of including everybody in what we do. We must, of course, and I think most Americans understand this and not only accept it, but endorse it, that we must, of course, focus primarily on the folks who need the public library, who need the public library the most. And one of the things we've been trying to do over the last couple of decades is get outside of the library, reach out to pull people in, to partner with we're the best partners in the community, in most communities. So reaching out to those partnerships. So it's not just, there's some concern, particularly among local librarians, that even the word outreach is a colonialist rhetoric, right? Well, if you're partnering with your friends and the other good folks in the community, and all kinds of partnerships, so churches, as well as social justice groups, as well as neighborhood groups, as well as civic groups, the chamber, including the Hispanic chamber and the Black chamber, et cetera. If you're partnering with everybody, and that's what libraries do, then there isn't any elite telling the community what to do. It's on the contrary, it's listening to the community and doing things with the community as a partner in the community. So that to me is how we engender and keep our civic trust, and it's the obligation we have to continue doing that. And librarians are really good with the word obligation. Most librarians become librarians because they have some sense of mission to the community, a mission to young people, a mission to kids, a mission to overcome the prejudices of the world, whatever it might be. We're a mission-driven group of people, and we need to keep that up. But the thing that's core to that is a sense of obligation, and a sense of obligation that transcends our own individual beliefs. Dead silence. Are you asleep? Yeah. I can do that. I've done that to many audiences. Insomnia is best friend.
You said some really inspiring words last summer at the National Medal Ceremony about the way that we all serve with our hearts. And I wonder if you'd be willing to say some words along that.
Sure. So I'm inspired by what Danielle Allen said in her essay about the Constitution and her book about the Declaration, where she was willing to use the word love. I mean, here's an African-American woman who undoubtedly has experienced plenty of the opposite from other people, but who genuinely feels devoted to her country, feels a sense of patriotism, feels a sense of the nobility of the ideals that we were founded upon, and understands that it's love of country, love of the ideals of the country, particularly in this country where we were founded with ideals. We weren't founded because of language or ethnic group or whatever. We were founded with a sense of a love of our country, and 13 colonies came together when it was predicted that they couldn't come together because they sensed that they had a love of the ideals that they shared. She talks about that. This is sort of a back door to the question of love, but yesterday we had a conference with the White House. It was the White House directed. White House has something called United We Stand, which is their focus on countering hate crimes. And a particular part of that, which we talked about yesterday with the White House and a number of associations, groups, is anti-Semitism. So we talked about that. But I finished, I rounded up the conference by quoting, and actually I think I've got it here somewhere, from George Washington's letter to the Hebrew congregation of Newport. And they had sent him in his first term as president, they'd sent him a letter praising his activities as president. And he sent them back a letter in which he talked about the country being founded with an enlarged and liberal policy, which included liberty of conscience. And he said, this is not an indulgence, the toleration of Judaism in a Protestant country. This is not an indulgence on the part of this country, but it is a recognition of the inherent natural right, the rights part. And then he said, any people of goodwill and good conscience will be good citizens. I thought that was a lovely sentiment. And I think it's because it's sentimental because George Washington understood the idea of love of country and understood that every citizen with good conscience, goodwill, and respecting the inherent natural rights of everyone else deserves to be a citizen and deserves the love and attention of fellow citizens. So I think in some measure, that's the way the country was founded. That's what Danielle Allen sees. And you know, I look at it when I got to the library as the director, I saw so much goodwill, so much love coming from librarians, particularly our children's librarians, but really all our librarians. Such goodwill towards the community and every person in the community. You know, we became a center for the homeless. We became a center for these folks coming out of prison. I remember my first encounter with a homeless person in the library was trying to use our catalog, our computer catalog, and I helped him out, and he was looking for Louis L'Amour books. Check in, Louis L'Amour, great name. And I had discovered, from our librarians that actually our homeless population and the population coming out of prison, to the extent that they were readers and were reading books, that they love Westerns. So I asked him a couple of questions about it, and he said, you know, you should read Louis L'Amour's autobiography, he said to me. And so, being a good citizen, I did. I read it. It's called Wandering Man, and I would recommend it to everybody in this room. It is a great book about reading. It's a great book about reading. And I thought, you know, what a little wake-up call for me. Here's this homeless guy coming out of the shelter who has just given me a book recommendation that will stay with me the rest of my life. And it's a Louis L'Amour book, you know, Louis the Love. And I took that as a sign from above. So, L'Amour, toujours l'amour.
Thank you so much, Crosby. It's our dearest hope that your term will be extended and we'll see you again next year. But what wonderful words to send us off with in case this is the last time we get to be with you. So thank you again. We're headed now into our long break. Well, our break is winding down. We see a lot of people back in the physical room and hopefully in the virtual room too. I hope you all, looks like we got some more luggage down. Congrats. Yay, elevator working for us this morning. This was one of the marquee topics that we wanted to train you all on this year, since we took a lot of time last year to revamp our own site visit checklist, and we're kicking off the 5-year cycle. So this is a hugely important topic. And this is going to give me a little moment to thank my staff again. Dennis and Madison in particular have carried a lot of the content for this conference. And, you know, Madison gathered up all your ARPA slides and kind of distilled through them. And Dennis had been working on the scenario planning like a champ, and we kept leaning on them as Cyndee and Laura were sort of advocating for the virtual folks and how we needed to adapt. But now we're pulling Cyndee out from behind the virtual curtain she's no longer the man behind the curtain, the great and powerful Oz. She has jumped right in, less than a year in the program now, has come from the perch that all of you sit in at the State Library and has just hit the ground running with us at IMLS. She, throughout the conference planning, like I said, has been a huge just champion of what we need to do to make this a good virtual experience. She went to not only the Baltimore conference last year in this vein, but then helped with the SDC conference in Austin and has come back with lots of learnings. And so hopefully we're, you know, improving and iterating on our hybrid experience for this year. And if we're not, that's okay. Just keep letting us know in the surveys and we'll keep working on it. But I'm so pleased that all 3 of our program officers are getting to present this session to you. So I'll call them up to the dais and we'll get started.
Thank you, Terry. And I appreciate the Emerald City Wizard of Oz reference because we don't have any of them in the presentation. But with, as Terry mentioned, with the start of this new 5-year cycle and the return to travel, we are bringing back site visits this year, and we are thrilled. These visits for us as program officers give us an opportunity to better connect with you, our states, and see firsthand the amazing work that you're doing. So we're very excited to see you in your home state. So for this session, we're going to be doing an overview of site visits and what to prepare and what to expect. What goes on during the visit, what goes on after the visit. We'll have a brief pause for discussion from, you know, both from the perspective of new folks and seasoned folks who've done these visits before. And then Dennis will be reviewing the newly revamped site visit checklist, which is in the SPR now. We also have some photographs that we'll be referencing. We like to call this our travel log. from our past visits that Dennis and I have done pre-pandemic, more or less, some post-ish. So just to give you an idea of what it looks like on the ground. But this photo here is of the State Library in Augusta, Maine. So the purpose of the visit is for monitoring the LSTA program, and it's also an opportunity to provide any technical assistance to you or any suggestions that we have to improve the program. We do not like calling these visits audits. We are not auditors. We are trained librarians, just like many of you are. And so we like to scope them as support visits. We want to see the wonderful things you are doing, both funded by LSTA, as well as what makes your programming in your state uniquely you. So this is really your time to show us what you do best. And in the end, if we have suggestions for how to improve those programming or how to improve following the guidelines and the requirements of the LSTA program, we will be tell you those up front, and they are recommendations. As I mentioned, we love seeing funded projects on the ground. It gives us way more insight into how we read the SPR reporting. And it also gives us better ideas of how to promote the work you're doing. It also allows us to promote other IMLS opportunities. As some of you know, the LSTA program is not the only thing IMLS does. We also have a whole arm of discretionary competitive grants. We want to promote those, give your libraries in your state opportunities to apply for those, as well as you. State libraries can also apply for those discretionary programs. And also the National Medal for Museum and Library Service, which we always want to highlight for everyone, which the finalists were just announced yesterday for this year's medal. So what we do to prepare for your visit. First, we send an initial notification that we plan to come to you in that year. And we want to make sure it works for your schedule. We don't want to catch you off guard. Those of you who will be we will be visiting this year have already received that notification. Then once we know that we're both on the same page, we'll send official letters through EGMS for records purposes, and then we'll start with the actual planning. In the meantime, what we do, we review your SPR reports, your 5-year plans, your evaluation, as well as any other relevant materials that we think will better prepare us for the visit in your state. This photo here is of my 2018 visit to the Ohio State Library, and specifically this was a site visit to Otterbein University. They do, and Cyndee Boyden in her previous role as LST coordinator is in the photo. They do really great conservation work at Otterbein, so that was really lovely to see. So what we expect from you, you will make the schedule, which includes visiting with staff at your office at the LSAA, as well as selecting and scheduling the field visits to the libraries and institutions that you want us to see. You prepare the full itinerary, and that also may include driving around your program officer. We, more often than not, 99.9% of the time, cannot rent a car. So we need to rely on you for transportation. We also need you to complete the site visit checklist, and this must be completed at least a week in advance before we visit. And Dennis will cover the site visit checklist a little bit later in the presentation. And here, Dennis, you want to talk about the photo?
This is my site visit to Alabama. Shout out virtually to Kellen for organizing it. This was in January of 2020. So February, I think, of 2020, right before we weren't traveling for a while. And I wanted to point out this particular visit. This was the B.B. Comer Library in Sylacauga, Alabama. And they were one of the very first national medal winners. And so I was able to, Kellen arranged the visit where I met with the current director of the library, that's to my right in the picture. And then to my left was the original director who was there when they won the national medal. And they did an incredible job of hosting me and going through all the things that they've done. And I would say, while it's definitely more important from a site visit planning perspective to see recent grants or things that have been funded recently. In this case, it was BB Comer had recently received a workforce development grant that I could see, but then I also had a chance to look at some of the longitudinal impact because the program has been around so long. It's really exciting when we're on site to see like, hey, we funded this in 2012 and now it's kind of exploded into this like, you know, community centric, fully embedded thing. So again, just to kind of get the creative juices flowing, it was just really cool to see all that has happened at the local level since they won this award over 20 years ago.
So the site visit itself, it usually lasts 2 to 3 days based on the size of your state. We meet with key personnel at your SLAA, which includes meeting with your chief or state librarian, your finance folks, any other staff members you think it would be helpful for us to get to know. And usually at that time on site at the SLA, we review the checklist. And so that's usually the first day of the visit. Subsequent days are then spent out in the field visiting projects that you would like to see. Now, during the pandemic, obviously, we had to put a hold on our site visits. During a brief time when people were vaccinated and everyone was excited during the summer, I think it was summer 2021, I was actually able to do a site visit to the DC Public Library. And, ooh, excuse me. And it was so much fun. And this is a photo from that visit. Thank you, Sarah, for organizing that day. You can see we're masked up. This is me, and Laura was able to attend the site visit with me as well. When this was us visiting DCPL's fabrication lab, which they use IMLS funds to fund 3D printers and really other amazing technology. All right, so what we need before the visit is the following. An itinerary and list of people that we will meet. This includes title and location, and if they are a subrecipient of the LSTA funds, information on that subaward or project. We want to see a copy of your SLAA organization chart, and we also need to see documentation for your maintenance of effort and match funding. Dennis, can I talk about this photo?
Yeah. So this was my first post-pandemic site visit at Tennessee State Library, which is extra exciting. And this was, I was talking with somebody else earlier about this particular situation where we'll talk about the schedule and how we do things a little bit later. But Tennessee in particular was scheduled for me to have a visit much earlier, but they were about to move into a brand new wonderful building, and they said, why don't you wait until we're actually in that new building and we could see it? And so that went, it was supposed to, I think it was supposed to be 2020, and obviously that didn't happen, so it got scheduled back to 2021. But all that to say is, like, the flexibility with certain situations like that, you know, we'd much rather work with you on those kind of situations. And in this case, in this picture, we visited, Jennifer took me to the Stones River Regional Library, and it was excellent. It was very illuminating, and typically one of the main elements of our itineraries, especially in a state like Tennessee that has such a robust regional system, is to talk to certain system heads. It's kind of also, it's illuminating to understand how the funds are handled at the regional level by those systems. And it's also kind of efficient because they represent a big swath of the state. So you can kind of hear from them and understand kind of the nitty gritty. It was a really great conversation. It was, I remember specifically being super impressed by how well the federal regulations trickle down to their purchasing and all of that process. So yeah, I highly recommend regional visits.
So other things that we will need to see are referenced in the site visit checklist. And those include sample policies that you have that are required as part of the program, written guidance to subrecipients if you do subawards, and if you have any other materials that may be referenced or useful, or just allow us to get a better picture of what's going on, we'd love to see them. Photos, letters of support from patrons, that sort of thing. just to better understand how the program works in your state. This photo here is of a assistive technology manual. During my visit in 2019, ancient history, to North Carolina, I was able to visit the Durham Public Library's sensory space, or it was the beginnings of the sensory space. And this was a really cool photo. Not only did I get to see the technology manual of how they help staff learn the materials in the sensory space, but they also had this really cool magnifier thing that, you know, you could zoom in on a piece of paper and read it if you didn't have your glasses or don't have glasses or just need help with the small print, which we all do these days. So when we talk about visits out in the field, it can be for any type of beneficiary, whether it is a sub-recipient of your subgrants or a library or any type of institution that benefits from your statewide programs, such as databases, for example. We'd love to see it. I said this before, essentially, we want to see what characterizes your program and your state. This is your opportunity to shine, and we want you to feel prepared. We don't want to come at you in surprise. So we're here to support you on the visit. You can show us any organization that you think is doing great work. A couple photos here. On the left was a summer 2021 visit to Maryland. That was a fun visit because it was like a hybrid visit where we did the site visit checklist and the administrative stuff through Zoom, but then I also got to do on-site field visits, which was fun. And that was to Cecil County Public Library, which I believe is a 2015 National Medal for Museum and Library Service winner. And that's a photo in front of their bookmobile, which was super fun to see. It was a really great trip. Dennis.
Yeah, this was my most recent trip to Minnesota. Shout out to Tammy for doing a wonderful job of organizing everything. And this is a wonderful little group photo of a group of Minnesota State Library Services staff and Minitex, which is an organization based outside in the university. And they're a major partner with executing a lot of statewide projects for the state. And they're an academic institution, they're academic kind of like driven, but it's one of those things where when we read in the SPRs, we see these recipient names, these organizational names very repeatedly. We're like, wow, they're really clearly significant partners. And so we spent a good hunk of the day just going through a number of their projects. And then, you know, I think there might be this assumption at the state level to say, oh, well, you know, they read all kinds of reports about statewide databases, like, you know, what's the big deal? But it's quite the opposite. Like the more common the project is, the more helpful it is to have like in-depth conversations about like, how are you doing it specifically in your state? Because I know that we get questions from other states about, hey, do you know of any states that are doing like consortial purchasing or all these kinds of random questions? And it's like, oh, wait, yeah, I know that Minitex is doing something with e-content that's really interesting. And so, yeah, as Madison mentioned, the support visit component is very applicable here because it's really like, there's only so much I can get out of reading the reports. And so asking those kind of nitty gritty questions about, okay, how do you work with the courier? How many stops do you have? It's just really interesting. And they may not have like a specific goal in mind. I always say that when I'm asking clarifying questions, like I'm not trying to uncover anything. It's just like, I'm just curious about how things work specifically in the state.
Yeah, great comments. And the photo on the right is of West Warwick Public Library in Rhode Island. I visited them. It was my first real site visit in 2018. And that's me with the state librarian and LSTA coordinator at the time with the director. West Warwick is a small library, sort of out in a area that I think could be described as a food desert. And they just have wonderful programs that support their community across all different types of demographics. including, I know they did technology and digital literacy classes for seniors at the time, food security programming. And I also remember they were really big, had a really big group for gaming and support for, I believe, Dungeons and Dragons specifically, but all types of gaming. Incidentally, after this, they've become a national medal finalist. And just yesterday when we announced the finalists for this year, they are included as a finalist. So congratulations, Rhode Island. Okay, so after the visit, relax. Seriously, we know that this is stressful, but we want you to know that you're going to do a great job. It's a lot of work. Now, after the visit, we will send out a letter thanking you for your work and your time that you devote to the visit. That will also include those recommendations that we may have for you, which we'll likely also talk about before the visit is over. For example, we may suggest that you revise your subrecipient guidelines to include acknowledging IMLS and outreach materials or something of that ilk. We also appreciate responses to these recommendations and may follow up with you for additional information or request more information on a project we saw that we may want to highlight. We also work with our communications team very often, and they ask us often about what type of things can be featured in our promotional materials, such as tweets, blog posts, that kind of thing. And so we always want to keep an eye out for things that we can feature on a national level. And in the past, we have done site visit blog posts highlighting visits to specific places. Now I'm going to pass it on to Cyndee, who's going to talk about our visits for this year.
If I can do this. Okay, great. So upcoming site visits. This is going to be where I try to recall all of my geography lessons, remember the state monikers. Dennis will be going to Idaho, New York, Missouri, Montana, and New Jersey. I will be going to Georgia, Florida, Kentucky, North Dakota, and I get to come back here in September. And Madison will be going to Puerto Rico, Rhode Island, Ohio, which I'm jealous of, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. These site visits will be happening between the months of April and September-ish. We try to get them during those months based on weather and our workload, and hopefully that works out best for all of you as well. And for next year, this is what we've slated. We have not reached out about this. This is just what we're thinking about, so nobody panic. You haven't seen this before, but we're thinking that Dennis is going to Arkansas and Wisconsin, Mississippi, Delaware, and Iowa. And I will be going to Colorado, Kansas, South Carolina, Mindy Copeland, I'm coming to you, Vermont, and Massachusetts. And Madison will have the Pacific Workshop. She'll be going to Hawaii, North Carolina, and Maine. Those are some pretty great places, my friends. She's got a great portfolio. We all have great portfolios. So
we can start to be competitive with our state portfolios anytime you want.
We do. Yeah, we do. It's pretty funny. At this point, we're going to have you folks do some work at your tables and online as well. We would like to generate some conversations amongst yourselves to start thinking about the site visits, and we want to pose these questions to you. For the veterans, for those of you who have been through the site visit before, what do you wish you would have done differently from your previous visits? What were your highlights? What was your experience completing the checklist? Any unanticipated delays in the process to watch out for? And for you first timers, what are your concerns? What are you nervous about? We're not trying to trip you up. We really aren't. But I know, having gone through it once, it is stressful. And then for everybody, we'd like to know, is there something that we should know about the site visit preparation process? So if you could take a few minutes, we're going to start with the veterans and have you folks address those first few questions at your tables and online. And then we'll do a share out and we'll just go to the next category. All right, folks, take some time to talk amongst yourselves. Veterans, lend your thoughts and experience. Thanks. If you could designate a table representative. We'd like somebody to come on up to the microphones and share your thoughts on the Debbie Hall is our first veteran volunteer, as she should be. Debbie Hall, what you got, my friend?
Okay, I am a veteran. Next year, if this is true and Dennis comes, it will be my 5th site visit. So we've learned a lot. As a state that does not do subawards, the first site visits were awkward because we knew they like to go out in the field, and we thought, well, we'll just take them to some libraries who use our databases, who use the summer reading program, who are friends to the state library and don't hate us, you know. And so the problem was that everybody came in August in Arkansas, and Terry Brown started it, and she came in, our highest temperature was 110. And then when Timothy came 5 years later in August, I think we hit 115. And we were going out visiting these libraries that we didn't need to go to. So here comes Dennis's visit. And so I started thinking outside the box. And I said, you know, we have a youth services workshop every March. And it is one of our best attended workshops that we do. And it's open to public librarians and school librarians. And it's to start off the summer reading program, and there are breakout sessions. And so I said, Dennis, can you come in March and come to our workshop? And he was able to do that. And I think that was the first time anybody actually asked somebody to actually come, you know, at a different time. And he was able to get there on a Wednesday. The workshop was on a Friday, and we have a managers meeting for all of our managers at the state library, and most of them are project directors. So he was able to attend that. So that's one of the main things that I think. And for all you newbies, just have fun with it. Think of things that you enjoy and that you really like about what your libraries are doing or what you're doing at your state library, and have fun with it. You know, after how many site visits, I've learned to relax about it. As far as the documentation, we do a 3-ring binder, and we get all of our documentation. We work with our fiscal officer. I have done, you know, the guidelines for all of our project directors that I update for every 5-year plan, make sure and have that ready. But it's nothing to be fearful about. Way back in the day, when there was a different vibe about IMLS, it was a fearful period. And I got that from our state librarian at the time, and it says, well, don't tell them that, don't talk to them. You know, well, I need to know this. Don't call them, you know, and it's like, I don't understand that. So enjoy it. Seriously, enjoy it. Show off your libraries, show off your state library, show off your projects. That's what it's all about, is showing off.
Thanks so much, Debbie.
Yeah, go ahead. I just want to piggyback on what she said. If we suggest a time to come to you and there is an event or something going on that you would really like us to see, suggest that time.
Absolutely.
We would love to switch it up and come when it works best for you. Or when it's not 110 degrees.
I don't think it was 110 degrees. It was Minnesota in September. So I'm not really a veteran, but I have been through this process once, and I've been through it without an LSTA coordinator. So I did all of it. As far as the checklist, which really is not that bad. It's just putting your ducks in a row. I did, even though I had interacted with Dennis many times before the site visit, I did still like read audit. And then my organization did as well. And so So yeah, we were all pleasantly surprised that, well, no, I wasn't surprised. I kind of knew this already, but Dennis is practically a perfect person in every single way. And like our tiny SLS staff or State Library Services staff of introverts. And here comes Dennis, and we're in a car together for 7 hours going around the state. It was wonderful. And I just want to give a shout out and tell you, yeah, just show off, relax, and give a shout out to Dennis because he is so knowledgeable. Just sitting down blindly in front of Minitex, he was able to relate and talk about programmatic things with an organization that he had never met. And so really just, and I have that sense also from Madison and Cyndee, the being able to like, you know, cross the waters and so knowledgeable. So don't worry about having to, I was going to put together note cards about each of our grantees, but then Dennis was so friendly and so knowledgeable that I didn't have to do that. So anyway, just I'm looking forward to it again.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Tammy's check is in the mail. Thank you.
Sure, Wendy Coppola.
So for us, my first site visit, I was just there like it felt like a month. It may have been a couple months. And so I've done that before. That makes me a veteran, but I was very new. So what could I have done differently? One thing was I didn't tell people your projects being highlighted because you're doing a great job. They thought they were in trouble. And no one told me that. So they were all super, super nervous. And then finally I'm like, you're not in trouble. We're picking you because you're such a great project. So make sure when you say the feds are coming, that you say because you're a great project. And that's something I would have done differently. And on there was something else that was, the highlights of the visit. You can't do it all like you want to do it all. Like you have to pick and choose and you want them to see every single project that you have. And you just have to pick a few. And sometimes it's maybe not the project that you are most proud of, but it might be someplace that they've never been, especially if someone's been there before. You don't want to go to that same project or that same library system. You might want to pick a different one in a different area. And I mean, it's a lot of fun, but you need a lot of help with it because it might be the LSD coordinator who's filling out the information with the state librarian. But then when it comes to driving them around and picking them up, you might want to have some of your other staff help you just so they get a break from you because you're like, you've been with me for how many days in the car. And then you feel like, oh my goodness, they don't want to talk to me anymore, but they still do. And I mean, and we had a lot of people who had volunteered. Oh, I want to take them out to dinner. I want to take them out to dinner. I want to be the one that's taking them and driving them. And because I got to see them 5 years ago when they came or the next time or that kind of stuff too. So really just have fun with it and make sure you have all your checklist stuff done.
Thanks, Wendy. And hang on one second, Susan. I would also say, and this is just me being a little selfish, for those of us who fluctuate between extroverted and introverted, please don't be offended if I say, I can't come to dinner. I'm done at the end of the day, folks. I'm really done. I love all of you. I will come to every single one of your states, but not for dinner. So just FYI, FYI. Susan, I'm going to check in on virtual. So hang tight 1 second. Terry, how are we doing? Great. I knew we would be. I think you have to turn the switch at the bottom. It's a very tiny little switch. All right, there we go.
Get used to the virtual side of life. All right, we've got some great active virtual participants. Thank you to all. And some of the veterans in particular, Amy in Florida said that her first visit 20 years ago had a highlight at the Deaf Literacy Center in Pinellas County, Florida. I hope I'm saying that right, probably not. Also just going to see programs in general, a highlight for her. And even when they arrange for IMLS folks to see the Secretary of State, the Assistant Secretary of State, the department CEO, all of those visits are important and help elevate the state library's work. So another highlight from her. from Karen in Illinois. She had years, also many years of site visits, and some where they had active subgrants and some without. And she said those years without, when they were doing more of the statewide visits, a little more challenging. So if you have the choice, like, be sure to go and see those active libraries that are receiving funds. Katie, and I think Delaware, had done a few site visits, but peripherally, and said it would have helped her when she got to the point where she was filling out the checklist to have been more actively involved. So maybe think about that if you have shadowing opportunities for other people in your state. Jean in Colorado agreed that if you don't have subawards, you just have to get a little more creative in your visits. And she also gave us a teaser, Cyndee, that you'll be going to prison on your next visit.
Will it be the first time?
I thought that couldn't get any more provocative.
Leave it to me.
I'm going to land on California. Lynn in California said her first visit was actually the virtual flavor, and this was during the pandemic, and she had viewed it as more of an audit at that point. So it created a lot of stress, and she will bring a different mind frame to it when she goes into it the next time.
Thanks so much, Terry. Thanks so much for all the virtual thoughts and shout outs and tips and tricks. Susan, I'm so sorry. Thanks for waiting. Appreciate it. No. No, you weren't. Oh, it's all yours. Just run with it.
Okay.
There we go.
The next person will have to put it back. I want to speak to the checklist. I have to say, when I opened it up, I went totally deer in the headlights, intimidated. But when you start working through it, it's not so bad. And ultimately, it was helpful for us. And I too have only been through one, and it was the virtual flavor.
Thanks so much, Susan. We're good at checklists. Please. Hit us, Angela.
Okay, see if I can. So I have been through two, one virtual and one in person. My first in person was literally less than a month after I arrived. Luckily, my supervisor took the reins, but it's a great way to get to know Dennis. 13 hours in the car that second week I was there. Highly recommend it. And that's not sarcastic. It was great. Actually, the great thing about it being so new to the job was I didn't know that this was a fairly big deal. I didn't know it happened that often. I didn't know enough to be freaked out by it. It was just like, oh, cool. I get to travel today. Yay. Wait, you're not paying for our food. That sucks. That's what I remember, is going to that cafe and going, we couldn't choose somewhere cheaper, huh? What I wanted to say, well, I just wanted to piggyback on the, if you have subgrants, I love the advice, make sure they know that you're coming for good reasons. But if you hype it up to them, they will be so excited. They will be so excited. I have yet to have a library that I've approached, because before we went virtual, I started chatting with some in anticipation of yours saying, hey, if we end up going to your neck of the woods, would you be interested? And they were ecstatic when I said, we were just so impressed with what you wanted to do, and we wanted to show you off to Washington. I did not have a single person who thought that was a imposition. The other thing I wanted to mention for the virtual one, which I'm sorry, it was not,
We all are.
it's a completely different vibe. Happened during CARES. It was not a great. The checklist is very doable. Just because you're going to have to share it with other people in your library, be sure to be aware of the strengths, like who procrastinates and who's going to take 19 follow-up emails, and who is going to take a knock on the door, and who's going to run down the hall every time you approach them and say, hey, follow-up question. Because at some point you have to hand over some of the reins to other people. And for me, that was the hardest part, was making sure that everybody has slightly different approaches. I had someone who had it to me 2 seconds after I asked for something, loved her to pieces. Had someone else who was much more time-intensive follow-up. So I would read through that checklist right away and make notes of who you're asking for what, and start with those hard ones first.
Really good.
Thanks so much, Angela.
I want to make one comment, just based things that have come to mind from everyone talking, and we talked about it briefly up here, and now I'm forgetting what that was. One thing to look at before your visit, is any documentation from the previous visit that occurred. So those could be the letter that it contains the recommendations that we may have given you in the last visit. And also someone mentioned looking at the previous itinerary, seeing what they did. If you want to take us to the same places because they're doing cool stuff, that's totally fine. If you want to mix it up, also fine. You are in control. You are great and powerful.
Yeah. And also too, while maybe some of the first timers might want to come up and while they're thinking about what to share or ask to the group, especially for the states that don't have a lot of, don't do subawards and are wondering what to do. Again, our primary focus is LSTA funded, grants to states funded work, of course. And obviously going to local institutions that sort of tangentially are impacted is great. And, but again, I think it can't be emphasized enough how any local library visit is so informative to understand how your state works, the culture of the state, those kinds of things are directly informed and help us when we're reading these reports, because we just, even though it may not be like, hey, this library received this sub-grant and here's this tangible item, that's not always an option for your visit, but knowing the kind of people that are in your state. There's a lot of times, something that we very much pride ourselves on with this program is we try to represent as much of the country to our agency. There are several libraries that we visited that we say, you should really consider applying for a national medal, and giving them that confidence to do it and helping us represent, or IMLS represent, as much of the country as possible. And then sometimes our discretionary colleagues will say, hey, we are looking for reviewers. Do you have any suggestions? And I'm always looking for people who aren't necessarily in that sort of elite, highly academic, well-resourced library kind of perspective, the small, the rural. Yeah, right. And I think that's a great perspective, but it's harder to find those really gems of people that would be really great to have this opportunity to add their perspective to a larger competitive grant program as a reviewer. So again, yeah, it's not necessarily maybe a sub-award that I'm seeing, but I'm seeing great people in the state, great libraries in the state, which is just a win-win.
Thanks, Ritu. We're going to move on to the second question. So I'd like you to take a couple minutes, and if you've got first timers at your table, great. If you don't, think back to what that felt like, or join up with another table. I'm flexible, you know me. What are your concerns or questions about the site visit process? What pain points are you already feeling? What are you getting torqued up about that we're going to try and assuage you of? So please talk amongst yourselves, find some new kids, and we'll see you in a couple of minutes. Thanks, everybody. Folks, we're going to wrap it up. Doing okay over there in the virtual land? I'm getting the thumbs up from Miss Laura. Great. All right. Who would like to share some thoughts from the perspective of a first timer? We got people coming up already. What are your
Rachel Cook in the flesh.
I'm here.
Oscar winner, Rachel Cook.
Also, I'm not contagious, just for the record. I'm not technically a first timer, but my first time was virtual, and yeah, 100% oddity, I will say that. It was very scary, very stressful. But my question is, when I'm doing the itinerary, Utah is a big state, and some of my coolest projects are hours away. So how far can we take you guys? What's a reasonable expectation?
Well, I'm looking at Missouri right in front of me, and not a big state, but a lot of things to see because of how much they subgranted. And what they ended up doing for that trip was I landed in Jefferson City, and then we did a tour of part of the state. We stayed overnight in Springfield, and then we drove even further, and I left out of St. Louis. So, and that, I think Montana's planning to do something similar to coming into Helena, leaving out of Bozeman potentially. So that helps a lot. And Mississippi even did the same thing. We stayed, because of how far the trip was, we stayed somewhere else overnight. Yeah, but you know, you don't have to either. But if that's like a really critical thing, like it's possible to.
Yeah,
Take
we
you
would.
anywhere, Rachel. I'll follow you anywhere,
Yeah.
girl.
Yeah, we're happy to go anywhere in the state that you want to take us. And if it requires that sort of extra, you know, like booking of flying out of a different airport or staying in another hotel for a night or two, we're down. We just need to know it a little bit more in advance, like maybe a month out. It would help. It would be helpful for us to know that.
And just, but you.
But we're gonna go to Carmen
Oh,
on
that's
this
right,
side
Carmen.
first. Hang on one second, Mara. Miss Carmen.
I don't generally consider myself ditzy,
No.
but there are times when I really am thinking I must be, because when I heard about site visit, my first thought was, oh, I hope she comes before I retire. Why would, I'm sure some of you would think that's pretty crazy. Not knowing what I'm in for, I don't know, I just kind of go, oh, this is gonna be so fun. I walked into my thesis, what do you call that? Defending my thesis, only I didn't know I was defending my thesis. I thought I was just getting together with my committee. And so I sat there and answered their questions, and I just thought this was just a lot of fun. And realized afterwards when I walked out, oh, I just did my defense. Oh, cool.
I can't wait to visit with you.
I also consider myself somewhat of an introvert, but I don't know, maybe I'm getting to be more of an extrovert. I am looking forward to it. I really am. And I appreciate so much what you are sharing, because it does give me an idea of what boring North Dakota could possibly do.
I'm already excited, Carmen. Don't you worry. I will say, Mara, 1 second. I will say on the staying with the introverted side of things, for those 13-hour car rides, silence is okay. You know, we're librarians. You know, we like occasional quiet. It's okay. You don't have, nobody has to fill the time the whole time. It's all good. It's all good. I'm
And
not Dennis, by the way. I'm
as
not
the
this guy.
extrovert, no, as the extrovert, tell me, please stop.
Please stop talking.
That's fine.
Dennis. Yeah. Mara, please share your thoughts.
Okay, so I have a site visit coming up in a couple of weeks. And I've been a fly on the wall for site visits before, but I've never been responsible. And I find that I am getting anxious thinking, how many hours a day should I keep them occupied? How micromanaging can I be and get away with it? You know? And then hearing you, Cyndee, say, oh, I need time off. I'm thinking, would it be okay to like schedule a whole day, but then put optional things and send it to you the week before, and you can say, yes, no, yeah?
Yeah, that would
Okay,
be great.
okay.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely am, like, again, the extroverted person, probably more of like a 12-hour, sure. But that's a little excessive. And I think the idea of picking and choosing what is possible is really a good idea.
Okay,
yeah.
Thanks.
I'm probably more like a 10.5-hour day, give or take.
Hello.
Hello.
So Christine from Hawaii, and now that I sort of know that you might come next year, but I saw on their Pacific workshop, and so, sorry, this is a question that probably only relates to us, but can you just mention a few
Yes, I would
snippets of what
love to
that means?
talk about my Pacific workshop, just so everyone knows a little bit more about what goes on beyond the Grants to States Conference. I'm also the program officer for the 6 Pacific territories and freely associated states. And so instead of hauling them all here, I meet with them in Hawaii every other year, and we have our own smaller version of this.
How come we all can't go there?
Yeah, their needs are a little bit different than what we cover in this conference. So it just works out better, I think, both financially and strategically with the programs. So what we try to do is when we do the Pacific workshop with them, we'll also tack on our visit to Hawaii. And a lot of times we'll put you all to work for the visit. Last year, we did the Pacific workshop last year. And while we didn't do a site visit to Hawaii officially for that visit, I had Stacy, the state librarian, come and do a tour of the library that's in Honolulu, which was really helpful and wonderful, and a great experience for the folks in the territories. So yes, we hope you'll be a part of the Pacific Workshop as well. Thank you.
Hello. Hello. This is my first site visit and I haven't even like peripherally been around them. So this is super new, but I was curious if you could talk about if there's value in seeing, I mean, now that we have our 5-year plans, we kind of have an idea of what changes we want to make. Would it be valuable for you to see what we plan to change so that when you come back in the future, you can see what's different and what the LSTA or IMLS money has done to like add value to the program? So maybe not necessarily showing off what's shining now, but what we hope to be shining later.
No, I think that's a great idea because it shows, you know, that you're hard at work and you have a vision for the future and you can share that with us however you want to. So that's a great idea.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think there's a section of the checklist that's all about the 5-year plan. And so that's a very tangible way of us understanding like the context behind it or where all of that's coming from. So I think that's great.
Carrie, any thoughts over there from, or Laura? Hi, Laura. Any thoughts from the virtual folks? I know they're lively.
Yes, there are a lot of thoughts.
Great.
Tom in Florida wanted to know how to determine which sub-grants get highlighted. Shannon in Georgia was concerned about how to showcase on behalf of services like demos. And there was a lot of question about the documentation needed for the checklist in general. Karen Egan also had a great suggestion about having a pre-meeting for all staff who will be involved in the site visit just to make sure everything's ready. And there was a lot of interest in seeing past itinerary samples.
Oh, great. Thanks, Laura. Thanks for all those suggestions. And I'm going to let Madison take it away.
Thank you. If you can't find a past itinerary, if you've had a complete change in staff since the last visit, we more than likely have those records. So feel free to ask us. We can provide you those.
Yeah.
And I think Dennis is going to get more in depth with the checklist, those details a little bit. And as far as selecting those particular projects, I think that came from Shannon directly. And I would say that potentially the best course of action would be to talk to your program officer so that the two of you could work that out and come to a conclusion. Bottom line, the three of us are so flexible about where we're going to go, what you want us to see. I know I'm super new, but I think I can speak for all of us where we just want it to be the best experience for everybody involved, us, you, them.
Yeah.
And so if that means 14 hours in the car or, 4 days, 3 airports, whatever, we're happy to do it. We are just so fortunate to be able to go out into the field and see your folks with you. We're so excited about it.
Yeah.
So,
and just to punctuate and emphasize once again, it doesn't have to be like a whirlwind.
It doesn't.
Like multi-day, 14 hours a day. I don't mean to,
7 countries in 4 days.
give that impression, but like, if there's something that you're just super passionate about, if you're willing to do that, that's great. We're willing to do it too, but it does not have to be, all like it's extravagant and all that. It's all good.
Hi, Talayla.
Hi. For preparing sub-grantees for the site visit, what types of information are you looking for beyond just the general overview? Are you interested in seeing their administrative processes, or is it more of like seeing the project as a whole?
That's a great question.
How do we prepare the sub-recipients?
I think generally we would just want to see the project as a whole. We don't necessarily need to see their financial ins and outs. Typically, like what you would provide in an SPR report in advance would typically generally be what we would want to see. Sometimes the project has already been reported on and we can just go in the SPR and look at it. If it's not, just a brief overview where they are in the process of the project.
Project directors.
Yeah,
Yeah.
who we will be meeting with.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. And, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, this is my impression. The smaller the grant, the kind of the less we would ask those sort of questions, just because we do have a grasp from you all every year about those financial transactions and things. Sometimes it's helpful to understand how it works from their perspective, you know, without it coming across like we're investigating anything. But, you know, kind of out of curiosity, but I would say maybe maybe if you have a large statewide partner that gets a lot of funds, you know, that's why I was talking the Tennessee example with the regionals, like they were very open and it was very illuminating to hear how they work with their local procurements in relation to that. So it was just kind of an organic part of the conversation. But it certainly wouldn't be like if it's a small collection development grant, I wouldn't imagine it being like a primary topic of conversation with that visit.
Chris, hello.
Everyone, can you hear me okay?
You can move the mic up a little bit directionally. There we go. Or just hold on.
I just wanted to say that whoever said Dennis is perfect, I need to have an argument about that. I've had the fortunate experience of being on one site visit to Mississippi, and Dennis was my representative to lead me there, and he did talk for about 12 hours straight every day. No, but he really, all of our program officers really know your business based on what you narrate, based on what you report. They are very good about coming to me on any questions that they have, and I learn a lot from them. So as the lead person for internal controls at the agency, and with grants to states being roughly 70% of our program funding, it's very important that we have strong internal controls, and our program officers and Terry really lead a very strong system that we can rely on. We have 17 clean audits in a row. If anything grants to states goes wrong, that's going to really put that in jeopardy. And I can say in my 11 years at IMLS, we haven't had that issue. So keep up that good work. The other thing I'll just say is communication. Build relationship with the program officers. They're not looking to get anyone in trouble. They're looking for best practices. They're looking to understand who's behind the reports, and they really know everything about you based on what you write. We provide them from the CFO's office. The reason you do the accrual reports, we're trying to get some insight from analytics just on numbers. And we provide that to them based on what we see from analytics. Maybe there's some slow spending going on. You might want to ask these questions, but it's about communication. So they do a great job. You do a great job based on what I see from having to go through audits every year. Keep up the good work. It was a great conversation.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it.
Oh, one other thing, Cyndee, Dennis had me thrown in jail as well, so we're there with you. Yeah, yeah.
I forgot we have photos. Yeah. That was a cool library.
We're going to move on to the last question, everybody. Is there anything IMLS should know about the site visit preparation process? Let's take a few minutes, talk at your tables. This is your opportunity to, you know, let your hair down. We can take it. We can take it. Let the virtual folks, Terry, I'll reach out to you folks in a couple of minutes as well. But what would you like us to know about the site visit preparation process? We'll see you in a few minutes. What should we know? Let us have it. So Layla's coming back up. Be brave, girl.
So Dennis is coming to visit in about a month, and the whole planning process was really smooth so far. So I just wanted to give positive feedback on that. Dennis reached out to see when would be a good time. So we were able to consult with different staff members and find a time that was great for everybody, and also won't be in the dead of the summer when it's really hot. So that was really great. I think one thing for new people that would be helpful is maybe having just a mini checklist of what needs to happen to prepare for the site visit. And maybe you have that and I just didn't see it, but something like the agenda, the checklist, just all the planning that needs to happen. That would be my one hopeful suggestion.
Great, thank you so much. You're not seeing that, so thank you. Terry.
We had more quietness on this question, but just two people, Shannon and Georgia, said that all the documentation and training provided by IMLS is really helpful, including this session right here. And I think owing to the chatter on chat, we're all learning from each other. And then Jeanette from Vermont chimed in that this has been helpful.
That's great to hear. Thanks. Jamie. Another solid veteran.
I just wanted to say that we had a lot of silence at our table about what IMLS could do differently. I mean, it's smooth, lots of prep like this, so.
Thanks, Jamie. Appreciate that. Okay, well then thanks everybody. I appreciate you using your brains and your hearts as always. I'm gonna pass over the conversation now to Dennis.
Thank you, Cyndee. That was really, really informative. I really appreciated everybody's participation in that. So, so this part should be brief. It's more of a technical overview of the changes to the site visit checklist. We are very excited about the changes that we've made. There have been a couple of pain points with the format of the previous checklist for a number of reasons. You know, it was a Adobe fillable PDF, and those are blessings and curses sometimes. You know, you have to have the right reader, things get weird. And in general, we just were like, you know, how can we not be so married to this PDF format? And so we were brainstorming and we thought, oh, well, you know, we're already in the SPR and filling out fields and we have that kind of mechanism. So what if it was more web-based? So that's kind of where that kicked off. And then we were like, well, if we're going to completely transform this checklist, let's look at these questions and see, like, are these questions valuable? Can we think about them a different way? And then the ever evolving question of, like, how can we make the required documents we ask of you a little bit more logical and not maybe placed at the very bottom of the list, because that can kind of get weird. So that was the inspiration for this process. And so, as I mentioned, it now lives in the SPR, which we are thrilled about. It's not a fillable PDF, but I know that some of you mentioned in the discussions having 3 meetings, talking to people who don't use the SPR to help fill it out. So it can be saved as a PDF just for your records, but then we also, and I believe we sent this to our states that we're visiting, there's sort of like a legacy copy of the PDF on the Grants to States manual for the checklist if you need it to be a little bit more living outside of the SPR for reference. I mentioned all the requested documentation materials can now be uploaded within the checklist. So a lot of you are familiar with uploading additional materials in the SPR. It's that same sort of function. It's just now associated with the section of questions that the documentation relates to. So we're hoping that's simpler. And I mentioned already the reference copy of all the questions are available on the Grants to States manual. So we're trying to marry that web-based and kind of document format of it. And so as the new checklist format, this is a little bit of a snippet of what it looks like. For those of you who are familiar with the PDF version of the checklist, it should look familiar. The headings are the same. And just the only difference now is that they're kind of expandable, collapsible headers. So if you just want to, again, to make it less intimidating, if you just want to click on general information, you'll just see those questions. You can click them when you're done, expand the next one, et cetera, and so forth. You know, save frequently and often, of course, as you all know with the SPR experience. And one of the features is now there's a last modified date that automatically tracks sort of like when you last updated this. So this can potentially be more of a living document for all of you, instead of it being necessarily this, like, let's do this all at once in 5 years. And as I mentioned too, even when you're done completing it, you can print it to PDF if you need a local copy with the answers in it. And I mentioned already that the checklist is divided into the 5 categories with expandable headers. And I also more detail about how the additional materials work. This is, again, a screenshot that might be hard to see, but this is under general information. That one header at the top, that's a section of the checklist, is it asks you for those bulleted items that are the reference documentation that relate to the general information portion of the checklist. So in the financial information, it'll ask you to upload, you know, MOE things, other financial samples. That's going to be in that section. And you can either upload the documents or you can provide URLs to the files. That's been increasingly popular, especially post-pandemic, to just send us links to shared folders of things. Our one note of advice is obviously we need to have, the program officers need to have access to the folders. So if you give us links to things we can't access, that would be tricky. And then this is a new feature and a whole new section of content that hasn't been in the checklist before. And they're at the end of each of the general sections, and we're calling them discussion prompts. We had a lot of discussion internally about, you know, we have the checklist and then we find ourselves asking follow-up questions. And because, again, we're just curious about things beyond yes or no, or like filling out a document. But we also realize that that might be off-putting to spontaneously have a follow-up question that makes it sound like we're, again, investigating something. And really, we are just curious. So we thought, why don't we have some of our questions that could prompt discussion, give you a heads up that we might be asking them or we're curious about them, but it's not a field that you have to fill out. So it's more of just like, hey, we might discuss these things less formally. So it's not in the official record. It's not anything like that, but it's just things that didn't kind of fit the checklist format. And again, just no curveballs. That's the whole point. We don't want to ask any curveball questions that leave you like, well, I don't know what to say, and causing any undue anxiety. And then, yeah, this is very briefly an overview of the checklist itself and why we have these questions. And so really the checklist provides us an overview of basic statistics, gives us a little bit more detail about your legal authority in the state to administer LSTA funds, and how you administer it, the policies, procedures, things like that. And then, of course, financial administrative information related to the program. In the general information section, I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. It gives us some general information. But again, it seems very basic. It's very basic statistics, but from a program officer perspective, it's very insightful to understand, okay, these are the amount of libraries, maybe these are the amount of regionals, or no, there aren't any regionals in this state. Those kinds of details are very helpful. Legal authority and compliance with federal law. Again, kind of makes sense as to why we're asking for those, but it also gives us an opportunity for deeper perspectives on legal matters, and the grounding for a legal authority in your state. Where is it in your state law that authorizes your state librarian to do what they do? And how federal law interacts with your state laws and policies. Obviously, we all know about the drug-free workplace. So if Dorothy was hanging out in the poppy fields, I don't know, she couldn't go to the state library for a while, I don't think. So that is my very labored Wizard of Oz tie to this session. And then the administrative activity section is very helpful. Again, these are the kinds of things that we do not have insight to with the SPR. What are your written policies and procedures? Who handles the grant records? Do you have an advisory council? You don't need one, but if you do, how do they interact with LSTA funds? And again, like giving a peek into the grant files, how do you organize them? How complete are they? Those kinds of things. And really, as we've done this, this is not only an opportunity for us to help offer recommendations, but you all have really great things happening that we had a lot of states asking, like, do you have a great example of a subgrant manual? We're like, yes, we do, because we just visited this state and here is an example. So again, it's about modeling and kind of elevating things that are really, really successful. And then financial activity, everybody's favorite. And this is typically where we would invite the any of your fiscal reps, comptrollers, even potentially, depending on how your state is structured, to help not only answer these questions, but also hear from us about why we have MOE, which is always just very mysterious to those who are not directly engaged in this. And so we, as far as scheduling the visit, you know, blocking off time for your finance people to help cover this part of the checklist is very important. So we just talk about 4% administration. How does that work? What are your cost categories for that? Talking about MOE, because again, as you know, our perspective in the SPR, we see your MOE number and it's there and we're like, thank you for that. But there's in the SPR, there isn't an opportunity to understand like where that's coming from. So that's why we talk about it a lot. Yeah, and if any audits have occurred and why, resolutions in that regard, and how your procurement policies interact with federal procurement policies, which is always fun, and any equipment or inventorying policies that you have. And in the wrap-up section, there is an area, maybe if there's some context that wasn't covered in the other sections of the checklist that you feel are important to add. It could just be about how the state is structured. You could even talk about maybe the political climate, if that informs LSTA, anything. It's just kind of like an open-ended area. And then this is relatively new. We get the agenda and itineraries via email, but this is an opportunity again for institutional memory and record keeping to have it in the SPR, so that way you're like, oh, this was the agenda last time. And so there's an opportunity to upload the documents there. We may have covered these elements already, but we do all of our states within a 4-year period. And then we won't visit any state in 2027 because you are all doing plenty with 5-year plan evaluations and writing a new 5-year plan. So that averages out for us to do about 5 states a year, as you saw in the schedule. And we also mentioned this already. We kind of base our schedule based on, okay, 5 years ago, I visited the state. So it's like a healthy distance between the two. That doesn't have to be the case. We've had states that just don't have a state librarian or don't have an LSTA coordinator or both. And they're just like, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense for you to be here. I don't know what we're really going to be able to talk about. And so I'll kind of reach out to another state and ask, hey, can I come a year earlier or that kind of thing. So we can make those kinds of accommodations, especially with plenty of advance notice. Yeah. So that was a bit of a flyby, but I wanted to not hold you up for lunch. And I really appreciated the healthy discussion that you all shared with each other. But if there's any questions about the checklist or how it works, I know there was somebody who had questions about documentation. If we didn't cover them in the way that the new checklist is laid out, please feel free to ask. Well, you know where we all are if you have any follow-up questions. I appreciate all of your time and all of your participation. It was really insightful. Thank you so much. Am I free to release them? Was delicious and Seattle-y. I am happy to start to kick off the second scenario planning session that we have. I'm thrilled that in the scenario planning session. Again, today is Glinda themed, so it should be really exciting and fun and not panic inducing scenarios like yesterday. As a reminder of the structure, again, we're talking about windfalls and wonderful things today. And you will, again, have 30 minutes to digest the scenario individually, kind of process it like before for 5 minutes. And then for 25 minutes, just talk as a group about the implications for the work of state libraries. Your facilitators you'll have an IMLS facilitator still. And and this is really a note to myself as a facilitator, is to identify sooner than when we did yesterday, a representative who will share a summary of the group's work when we come back together. And we'll have additional time to also debrief across both days about the planning process, scenario planning process in general, and what you gathered from it. This is a reminder of the norms. Be open to new ideas, challenge your own assumptions, suspend your disbelief, of course, very important. Stay in 2040 and not how that couldn't possibly happen, because we're in 2040 and we're suspending our disbelief. And once again, fully participate, listen actively, contribute, leave space in the conversation for others, and stay engaged. All right. So now we are pre-assigned the breakouts by state. We know that there are more than one of you per state. In some instances, that means both of you just kind of go as a unit. And so in the Madison Ballroom with Madison, of course, is Alaska through Minnesota. Terry in the East Room has Missouri through Pennsylvania. And I have on the South Room, Puerto Rico through Wyoming. And of course, we have our wonderful virtual breakouts, and they have the link to the separate breakout room. Yeah, right, exactly. All right, so without further ado, let us break out. Break out. Do you need more time to report out for the virtual? Why don't we start with the virtual this time around? Oh. Wrong way.
All right, so in our scenario, based on a new study from the Department of Ed, literacy rates in adults have jumped from 79% to 99%. Findings credit programming and collections in public libraries across the country. Demand for library services and reading materials is skyrocketing. Reading is now cultural capital in the United States. Personal cachet is measured by the amount of books one reads. I know, some of you are really excited. I know. Someone on chat described it as library utopia.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for the first question, what would be the implications for the state library? Leveraging successes, focus on equity, efforts for children's programming should be stepped up for sure. And that would probably include consultants broken down by grade, like elementary, middle school, high school. Audio books and ebooks would need to remain in place for sure and relevant. Let's see here, libraries and publishers would, the SLAA would have a role in the contract negotiations. There was conversation about interest groups and they're having to navigate that complicated sandbox. How about we put it that way? Consider how many library schools are currently offered in the country, and should that increase? And we want to make sure that libraries can continue to provide quality reading for users, like an info-lit theme, and they were emphasizing quality, not just quantity.
Very good. Good job, virtual group. All right, who wants to be the first of the in-person group to report out? Not everybody at once. All right, Nicolette.
Yeah, get it over with. So our scenario, by 2040, federal, state, and local governments collaborate to guarantee that everyone in the United States has affordable access to the internet at a fast speed, we decided. This is a result of years of planning and installing infrastructure with assistance from libraries and communications companies. Devices are readily available to the public, and digital literacy is also generally agreed to be universal. So we talked about how even if people have access to devices, and the like basic digital literacy to use them, that libraries will still probably necessarily need to focus on things like information literacy, which is not guaranteed just because you have a computer. So teaching people to, we all know what information literacy is, as well as, financial and health literacy and all of those kinds of things. We also talked about early digital literacy and looking how young people are interacting with technology, and that's something we'll have to consider probably differently than we do now, but still incorporating technology and literacy into early literacy programming. We talked about not a huge shift in what state library agencies and coordinators are doing, potentially just reinvesting some of our dollars away from buying lots of devices all the time, or buying, working on the broadband, but, investing in project management, future technology. We talked a little bit about AI, and I said robots and VR, but in 2040, it's probably going to be things we can't even really comprehend right now necessarily. Funding, we will need to consider funding things like more databases, more training in information literacy, also more ebooks, some job titles we talked about, continuing with our technology and innovation librarians. I think I wrote down early digital literacy trainers. I know there was the word shepherd thrown around, technology shepherd, because we need people to shepherd people through this change, and that would be a big role in the library. And we did talk a little bit also about mental health and wellness, human connection, and sort of counter programming to all of the connection and bringing people together back in spaces. And I did write SEPA compliance really big, and making sure that everyone's doing that too. I probably missed a lot because we had a very engaging and wide-ranging discussion, but that's the summary. Thank you.
That's a good summary. I was there. It was good. All right, next group. All right.
So our scenario, I know this is supposed to be the positive one. This is what our scenario was. Following an overhaul of the US Constitution and an executive order from President Lisa Simpson in 2040, all state librarians, top SLAA officials, are appointed governor of their respective state with no term limits. Moving forward, it is required that the governor have a background in libraries. It took us a little while to start talking. And I will say that my comment was, I don't like any of this. Jamie made a really good point that as librarians, we really value being nonpartisan. So you go from that to being political, and it was, I think, just very uncomfortable, and maybe we're just used to dealing with, oh, there's a disaster, let's go fix this. Like, we're used to problems, we're used to fixing things. So there were a couple different things that we kind of came up with. The first is what librarian would want to be governor, kind of, but then you start looking at the different state librarian requirements, because we all have different requirements with that. And then we did decide that the LSTA coordinator would be lieutenant governor, and I feel like that's a very fun position. But there were some, so some of the concerns that kind of came up first were, we're looking at what's our mission creep, because now we're in charge of everything. And even though we generally think we're in charge of everything, now we really are in charge of everything. We would probably take a different approach to budgeting. The types of things that are funded, not just libraries, but I think a lot of the social services that we wrap ourselves around, education, people would really want to partner with us. We would really, it would be that type of thing. IMLS would probably be a lot more political. We did talk about there would probably be a lot less internal hires and a lot more political appointees, and that can go in a lot of different directions. There would amazingly be even more bureaucracy possible. We talked about there would be a lot more scrutiny of library services. and more praise. You kind of get a little mix of both. You get elevated, and sometimes when you're elevated, it's like, oh, look, everyone's paying attention and thinks we're lovely. And then everyone starts picking at us a lot more. What we really wanted at the end, we decided was we want more money, but we just want everyone to kind of like leave us alone. Libraries would probably be attacked even more. We did eventually get around to some of the wonderful things that this could create. Increases in state aid, kind of getting back to more funding for social services and cultural institutions. More money, more staff, more ability to really set our own priorities. More support for workforce development and lifelong learning. We had talked about like, oh, there'll be a lot more funding for universities. And again, like some of the other people are talking about library degrees and any other kind of degrees, being able to really support things that we value with money. That we would have a level playing field for funding for libraries of all sizes. I think we all know that in many cases, it's very local funding, and it just depends on like, do you have things there that like have property taxes? And again, getting back to that different funding piece. The other thing that we finally said was we would definitely have conferences in Hawaii. And I think that's the important note to add on.
All right, our third and final in-person group. All right. Luck.
So our scenario was, due to the productive work of COSLA, the federal funding goal of $10 per capita is achieved for LSTA starting in fiscal year 2040. Note, in 2023, the federal funding level of LSTA is approximately 50 cents per capita. Each state and U.S. territories' federal funding in the Grants to States program increases from the year prior by a factor of 10. The states receive notice of this 3 months before the new awards are issued. Kind of deja vu, maybe a little bit. Okay, so we structured ours in threats, opportunities, and then kind of other stuff that didn't quite fit. So the first thing we brought up was the MOE and match. Obviously, MOE is an average of the 3 years prior, but meeting that match for some states might be a big issue. I think for many of us, having that state funding available is something that was of concern. We weren't sure if it was an opportunity or threat. It's kind of in between. So, opportunity-wise, we saw that we could fully fund local projects without asking for match potentially. And we would be able to create equity with such a large amount. We can rethink programs and we can fund larger projects and obviously do more subawards with these funds, and especially tackling issues like building capacity and doing multi-year grants to rethink how programs are currently being run. So with the short notice, we thought that there might need to be a need for the quick and easy grants just to get money out the door. And that could be through mini grants or formula grants. And we thought that an opportunity would be a dedicated focus on specific populations like the underserved and doing comprehensive research. So we're not spending money without knowing what the need is. And we saw that this could be an opportunity for growth for LSTA coordinators. There could be chances for promotion. We saw the role changing from more of a day-to-day operational to more of a managerial, because there's going to be more staff needing to run the program, doing the program officer work in the day-to-day. State libraries would have more sway at the table, and with the extra funding that comes with more partnerships, and so that can be kind of good or bad. And there's the opportunity to revisit construction with LSTA, to open that can of worms. And plus or minus 5-year change, 5-year plan changes mid-cycle. And the administrative costs, the 4%, that could really fund a lot more stuff at the state library and really open up opportunities for other spending. So threat-wise, we saw additional staffing as being an issue. Everybody's hiring. Are we still hiring, Ben? Yes. Fatigue, not only internally at the state library, but also with sub-awardees. There'd be grant fatigue, timeline and potential delays. Got a +1 on that. That would just be what we've all lived through. So smaller libraries, not having the capacity still. You know, we all have libraries who don't apply for grants. That's just going to continue forward because their capacity doesn't change just because we have an increase in funding. But that could also be an opportunity to how can we help support them better. And so more money, more problems, and the political ramifications of visibility. The state library would have a seat at the table, and what does that mean for people trying to use it? More audits. Sorry, I scribbled that word. I was like, no. The potential loss of local funding due to the increase of federal funding. So local libraries could lose money due to this increase. Turnover, extensions, and then the state library could be viewed as big government because of this massive amount of money. And so the trustworthiness of libraries could be impacted, which is something that I think we all find very important. We talked about potentially like having a startup mentality, but how to approach things strategically. So try to slow it down on the front end, and we'll have additional grants processing to make sure all the components are in the application. So like when you're doing those initial checks on an application to make sure it's complete, that will be more time consuming because obviously you'll have more subawards. And yep, I think I hit everything unless somebody has something they want to add.
That's great. Thank you. All right.
Dennis on your right. Hi.
Hi.
I inadvertently only answered one of the questions. I need some more coffee. I'm so sorry. I just wanted to give back some of the feedback that I managed to capture. Just as a quick reminder, this is the scenario where the literacy rate jumped. And for question number 2, the role of the LSTA coordinator, there would be an LSTA coordinator department. And more sway in the organization, like Catherine was saying. And we talked a lot about how did we get here. Publishers were overthrown, which was really interesting to consider. Those audio and ebook licenses were retained by the libraries. We talked about increased social services offerings, healthcare, telehealth in the libraries, and more remote learning. Provide additional services to incarcerated or decarcerated folks. And then for number 3, we talked for the funding, support a shorter work week, flexible work hours, no parameters for readers. So this was something that we touched on for, you can read anything you want. There's no ban. You can pick up any book you like, folks. Some of us may take this for granted. Please do not. Let's see here. SLAA retains licensing that I said. Sustaining the 99% literacy rate, we would want to make sure the messaging and the perception of the libraries maintains that. Like Catherine said, revisiting the construction can of worms is a possibility. Libraries as works of art or tourist destinations. We've seen some of those in our lives, which are just amazing. Book groups, not just functioning as book groups, but also to combat loneliness and social anxieties. Sort of like somebody literally said book groups on steroids, which I kind of liked. And an equitable base collection for every single library. So you're sort of all starting out at the same place. IMLS would have more money than the Department of Defense. Just marinate in that for a second. And no SPR. And finally, on number 4, for job titles, we talked more about early childhood and development librarians, equity-focused job titles, a reader. Isn't it great to be read to? How about that? A programming department, an author liaison, a library extension consultant. More social services coordinator or consulting, a book group, again, a book group coordinator, drone book drop delivery operator.
Oh,
love that. Books for babies. So as soon as you bring your baby to the library for the first time, you get a book right there at the library. I love that. And that would be addressing, you know, the high adult literacy rate, but we want to make sure that those babies get started as soon as possible. And helping caregivers and parents to pass along that increased literacy rate with best practices to the young ones. Sorry to make you all come back to me, but I just wanted to get all that in. Thanks, Dennis.
Great. Wonderful. Okay. Well, yeah, hats off to everybody. I don't want to get too much in the way of what's coming next because our Deputy Director for Library Services, Cyndee Landrum, is our kind of futurist maven, and she's going to speak to us virtually very quickly. But I wanted to just spend a little bit of time asking you like what your overall impression of the process was. What type of scenario fostered more interesting discussion yesterday or today's? And what insights did you glean that you could apply to your work? We're really interested in those kinds of how this could kind of be transferred, this practice could be transferred outside of this process in the conference. So again, just for a couple of minutes, if anybody has some quick impressions, we can popcorn them and then pass it on to Cyndee.
Dennis, I shared some of this with Terry, who led the scenario that I was in before, but I really liked this exercise. I hope that the folks in the room did as well. Yesterday's more provocative one, perhaps with the union that Madison led, and then, you know, the more money than God that Terry just led with us. I think giving us these scenarios that seem wild and putting them so far in the future that some of us might be retired allowed us the space and the grace to just kind of go crazy with, you know, what we're sharing and what we're thinking, you know, abolish the SPR over here on the virtual conference. I don't know that I would have said that if the scenarios weren't a little more, you know, if they were just a little more staid. So I think it's great. And I think that the way that you folks asked for our participation with those kind of 4 questions, and then each of you brought a different flavor to how you kind of facilitated the conversation. There's so much in this exercise that I'm going to steal from you to use for future facilitation groups that I do. So thank you for doing this.
That's wonderful. Thank you. That's very encouraging.
Some thoughts from the virtual world, Dennis.
Yeah.
This would be an interesting staff exercise. Let's see here. I got to scroll back up. Love this type of scenario planning because you really see needs for now and the future. It was kind of like creating stretch goals, helps identify gaps. This would be an interesting exercise to use at this SLAA when we were looking at our programs. That's what we've got so far.
Great. Right. All right. Well, I appreciate all the feedback and the participation. You all were wonderful. So thank you so much. Cheers.
We have a surprise guest for you. My boss, our Deputy Director of Libraries at IMLS, who's actually an expert in this. We weren't sure if it would work out for her to join us virtually, but she's here. And Cyndee Landrum, who's been with us for a number of years now, just for the first time this past year, ran our staff through exercises like this. She's an expert in this and is part of the Futures school of thought. There she is. Hello, Cyndee. We can see your
Hi,
face
everybody.
now.
How are you? It's great to be with you virtually. I'm really jealous that I'm not with you in person, but somebody has to keep the lights on here in DC while everybody else gets to go out and play. So I am glad to be with you and super jealous because I did sneak in to the virtual session and got to hear all of you report out, and I was super stoked that you all were super stoked about this exercise. As Terry said, we have been running through these scenario planning types of exercises and futures work in our Office of Library Services. And I just wanted to sort of stop in and share some thoughts and insights with you as you step away from this and have some time to kind of think about this process that you just engaged in. First of all, I'll just say when Harry says I'm an expert in this, I don't know if I would say I'm an expert, but I definitely am an evangelist of sorts. My first engagement with futures thinking actually happened when I was what I like to call a wee young librarian in the state of Arizona, the state I call my second home. And actually, futures thinking was a competency that I had to be able to demonstrate as a part of my performance review. So I was in it very early and have continued in the future space, both academically as well as a matter of practice. And pretty much every place that I've been, I've done this work or attempted to do this work with my colleagues. And for those of you who may know me, you know I've been a lot of places. So I've touched a lot of states and have relationships with many states. And so I'm just really happy that this body is doing this work and fully engaged in it. And special shout out to a number of states that I know are really leading large scale efforts here. But I wanted to just share one of the reasons why I kind of popped in to see how you guys were progressing with the questions is because I just wanted to offer a bit of some thoughts as you move this forward or if you plan to or desire to. You know, one of the things I found really interesting in your presentations, the scenarios you got today were, wonder and awe and windfalls, and they were super, super positive. And on a few occasions, I heard people say, I'm sorry, but I really need to address this sort of not so positive thing. But that's the thing about the scenarios is that whether it's this catastrophic thing or this wonderful thing, that they can actually kind of go either way. They're not going to be 100% positive or 100% negative, and they actually provide a variety of opportunities for us to think about something in very different ways. But as you're thinking about this and you walk away from it, and there's a lot of great comments and positive response to this, I also want you to think about the things that maybe challenged you in doing these scenarios, or if you're thinking about how you may navigate this type of work in your own organizations or communities or libraries, some of the challenges you might face, and some of the important learnings that you might take away. One of the pushbacks I used to receive, particularly early in my career and engagement in this work, is I'll just share a story. It was around ebooks, so the reading scenario really resonates with me. But it was about 10 years ago, and of course, we were at another sort of interesting juncture with our friends in the publishing industry and ebooks. And I was sort of in a speculative space, thinking about the what ifs. What if the big 5 became the big 1, and I had a library director say, well, you cannot predict the future. And I was like, you are correct. I cannot. But I can create the future. And that's really the thing that is the takeaway. And I want to kind of break down those two really important words in that response. I and create. And so I'm going to start with the I, because the I is all of us. And it's really important when we're engaging in scenario type work, or, there are tons of other methods in the futures work and for strategic foresight space that we can use. But it's really important for us to understand where we sit in a particular future and where we sit in our own engagement with the future in terms of ourselves. So, you may have had some discomfort, or you may find that others may have some discomfort, and that's actually super natural. I mean, there are neurological studies that indicate that our relationship to our future self is like how we relate to a stranger. It's like we can see ourselves, but we don't know ourselves. And so that can often impact how we sort of engage with the future. And also there are environmental issues and sociocultural issues that can impact our thinking or our ability to think in this way. So for example, if someone grew up in a home where no one asked them, well, what do you want to be when you grow up? Or they had a health concern that, they heard that, you're not going to live past a certain age. It can be really difficult for people to engage with a future that they've never been exposed to or thought about, or particularly if they haven't thought about themselves in the future. But I think someone said this earlier, and it's absolutely true. It can also work to your advantage. I heard someone say, oh, I don't have to think about that because I'll be retired. Well, that is so true. I've, worked with scenarios that are 10 and 15 and 20 years into the future. And oftentimes I get the best, most creative responses from people, because they're like, guess what? That's going to be on you because I won't be here. And so it does allow you to let your imagination run free, even if you recognize that you may be a part of setting the stage for a particular scenario to evolve. It's a whole different ballgame when you realize, oh, that's going to be somebody else, not me. But the other thing I want to address in that I can create is this idea of creating the future. And it seems like, oh, I'm going to put on my cape and I'm going to do this. It's going to be me and I'm going to change the world. And it really, obviously, it's not. There's a lot of moving parts when we think about the future and how we create conditions that are conducive to it. But we can influence, we can shape, we can think about the future and even our everyday decisions. How might this decision play out in, say, 5 years? And I'll sort of give a scenario. Sometimes I would get called into, come up with all the reasons why something shouldn't happen. For example, because looking forward, a particular decision may have implications that we, maybe haven't considered. But the thing I really want to leave you with, and the thing that I want you to take away from this, is to really, a way that we sort of think about creating the future is by paying attention and being curious. I don't know if any of you have had this experience where you read an article in the library journal, or you saw something in your local news, or you overheard a conversation and you went, And oftentimes we kind of dismiss the and the but futures work allows you to engage the and the So thinking about something that you might see that sort of sparks curiosity about, what would happen if that particular thing actually kind of took hold and became a thing, and what does it mean for our state library? What does it mean for our local libraries? What does it mean for people that work in libraries or the communities that libraries serve? I think it's really important to allow yourself the space to be curious and to allow yourself to engage the and the but also to think about, well, okay, what kinds of things might be driving these things? As I was sitting in the virtual session, the conversation shifted to like, well, how did we get here? And that is really an important conversation to have when you're doing the futures work, because when you set a future state, it's really important to kind of backtrack and think about the things that might have gotten you there, or the things that you might put in place that could shape that future. In a dystopian sort of future, you might want to think about constraints that you might want to engage that might curtail the growth of that dystopian future. But I know that I am the difference between you all catching a flight and also you all maybe going to dinner if your flight is later. But the thing I really want to impress upon you is, one, as you're thinking about this and engaging this and thinking about this experience, the number one thing is to stay curious and allow yourself to think about what could be. And you're right, when people tell you you can't predict the future, you're right, you can't predict it. But there are enough things around us that are happening globally, in our local communities, nationally, that really give us an opportunity to think broadly, to think forward, but also to think about how we can shape the future and basically influence a future that we would like to be a part of, and that we would like to live in, and that we'd like to leave for others. So I'm going to leave you with that as you head off into the skies, or if you're driving, or however you got to this conference. And thank you so much for being participants. And I want to give a special shout out to my colleagues in Grants to States, because they always put on an engaging and informative conference, and they always have their finger on the pulse of what's important in libraries and what's important to our colleagues, and I call you all our partners in the state library. So thank you so much for your time, and safe travels to you all.
Thank you, Cyndee. And thank you for holding down the fort for us. I have to say, the Cyndee Landrum era at IMLS, and you should know she is the one who will be in place after our director changes course. So she will be in a seat to make decisions that Crosby is making at the moment. And the Cyndee Landrum era at IMLS has been wonderful. She is an amazing manager, an amazing librarian with lots of amazing experience. And we just felt like this was the moment that we had to bring her in and introduce her to all of you. And hopefully we can do a little more of this with her in the future. I'm gonna grab the appreciation wall. Hang on one second before you take off your flights, because we just have a few closing things that we'd like to say. And while I'm doing this, go ahead and get out your survey if you haven't finished it already, or taken the opportunity to wrap it up. And please take the time to do this. Once you're done, we'll have a place at the registration desk for you to drop them off. And we take this feedback so seriously. We iterate every single year based on what you tell us. We're not out just to get the kudos. We want all of it. We want you to be real and tell us what we need to do differently. So please be honest and we will adjust. Oh, thank you. Okay, so we've had the last couple of days an appreciation wall, which is a big piece of paper. But it looks like this for those of you tuning in virtually. And there aren't too many of these appreciations. So I'm going to go ahead and just read through them while you're filling out your surveys. And I love this scene from Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz where they're like, "Hail, Dorothy." This is how I feel about, like, "Hail, colleagues. We haven't killed any wicked witches, but you're awesome.
So, first appreciation I'm reading. The mentor program is invaluable. I couldn't do my job without Wendy Coplin. Yay. Shout out to Michael Golrick for supporting me in my first PLS, Public Library Survey Administration, from Laura Hicks. Thank you both. Thanks, Maura from New Jersey, about the light rail details. From Carmen in North Dakota. I think we all learned something from Maura. Okay. Thanks to Claire. Her quick thinking and hometown knowledge helped us have a truly delightful dumpling dinner last night. Thanks, Claire. That is an IMLS appreciation. I may or may not read it. Rachel Cook, thank you for the kind words and the Oscar nomination. So glad you could join us in person. Your friend in Texas, Erica. Feels like summer camp. I don't want to send you home. Okay, so this is a two-parter. So to Debbie in Arkansas and husband, thank you for walking with me or letting me walk with you to the hotel. So glad I ran into you on the train. I would still be sitting on the corner of 4th and Spring if not for you. I will be forever grateful. Your neighbor in Texas, Erica McCormick. This is my first time at a Grants Estates, and everyone has been so incredibly welcoming. I appreciate all of you. Thank you. Jessica Otto in Wyoming. So nice. All right. And to the IMLS staff for your warm welcome, to a neophyte coordinator. That's a great phrase. We should brand that. You started my conference out just right. We're glad. Yay. All right. Successful appreciation wall. We'll do it again. We're getting ready to leave. And I just want to say it's an understatement that we enjoy being with you at this conference. It makes our whole year worthwhile. Seeing you and seeing evidence of your amazing ARPA-funded projects, for example, just makes our federal hearts beat with joy. And the same will be true of site visits as we kick off this new cycle and go and spend more time with you in the field. We're so excited to get to know you better. The welcoming and helpful nature of this community means that even though we're disembarking now from the Grants to States Conference bus, we still have each other to lean on. So thank you all for upholding this program with integrity and making a difference with federal and state funds across the nation. There's often a specter of fraud, waste, and abuse when it comes to federal programming, especially in this time of stimulus funds. And I can say, honestly, we really don't worry about that at IMLS. It's because all of you do such a good job as pass-through entities, monitoring that money, making sure it is handled with care. And the things that we get to worry about, conversely, are like, are we amplifying your great work enough? So that is a wonderful thing to have to worry about. So click your heels together, everyone. We're sending you off from Emerald City back home until we can be together again. And until then, be well. Yay. Safe travels, and virtual folks, we'll see you on the other side.